warning, this entire video is intended only for those who have already seen this movie. The entire thing is one giant spoiler, and we are going to deep dive into literally every aspect of this film, so go watch it first and come back. The Barbie movie is a fantastically flamboyant, yet surprisingly multifaceted film, and it's shocking to me how many people don't understand it. The vitriolic, angry criticisms that many facets of the media have thrown at this movie, such as that it hates men or that it's woke propaganda, are not only misguided, but blatantly untrue, leading to one of the most obvious examples of both media outlets and content creators trying to control a narrative to fit their own agenda that I have ever seen. But you don't have to take my word for it. The evidence speaks for itself.
Thanks for the warning that this is really just another indoctrination vehicle.
And I curse in the name of the Lord this new Barbie movie. Make God loose a holy judgment.
My intention here is not only to identify these unfounded and derogatory claims and those who are perpetuating them, but also give you precise examples that prove that they are absolute bullshit. We'll call this section Part 1, Misinformation and Misconceptions. But beyond that, we're also going to explore every aspect of this film, including the underlying messages that many people overlook, as well as reviewing the history of Barbie and her influence in modern society as a cultural phenomenon recognized all over the world and spanning decades. We'll call this section Part 2, the movie. And finally, in Part 3, Other Criticisms, I'll take a look at a few videos from other content creators, as well as talk about the implications that the success of the Barbie movie has on the future of big-budget cinema. I also waited for this film to come out on Blu-ray and 4K specifically so I could legally capture footage of the clips that I could use in this video, and from what you see behind me, they've obviously made their money off of me, so please, Warner Brothers, just be cool, alright? Just be cool. Let me make my little video. Because this is going to be an extremely thorough deep dive, there may be sections that you're most interested in watching first, and that's totally okay. I do, of course, recommend watching them in order, but if you'd like to jump around, I've divided the video up into chapters, with timestamps available in the description. First and foremost, I'd like to point out one giant pink elephant in the room. The Oscars are coming up in a little over a week, and I know a lot of people were upset about the fact that Margot Robbie wasn't nominated for Best Actress, or that the film was being forced into the adapted screenplay category rather than the original screenplay category. But frankly, going any further into these topics is to give the Oscars a modicum of respectability, and I'm unwilling to do that. I will not give credence to an academy who claim to care about the art of cinema, while simultaneously hurrying foreign filmmakers off the stage, cutting 8 whole categories from the live telecast to make room for Spider-Man Amy Schumer, and allowing Pixar to literally give themselves an Oscar.
And the Oscar goes to Inside Out, Pete Dr. Jonas Rivera.
Nor do I need to mention Ryan Gosling succinctly summing up his disappointment by quoting the lyrics to one of the film's original songs. Quote, "But there is no Ken without Barbie, and there is no Barbie movie without Greta Gerwig and Margot Robbie." Luckily, I don't need to voice any of these injustices because the actors themselves and even the Oscars marketing campaign has done it for me.
After you've won the Oscar.
Well, that's not gonna happen. Good thing Greta's got director in the bag.
Oh, Ryan?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. What?
The Oscars. Live, Sunday, March 10th.
Before we get into all the aspects of the movie itself, we need to first address the misinformation surrounding it.
Your girl Barbie, who's the girl with all the cool moves?
So what do these critics all have in common? They can't seem to look past the so-called antagonist of the film. The buzzword that has the critics of this movie all wound up. Patriarchy.
P-A-R-B-I-E, pink as you wanna.
The term patriarchy comes with its fair share of societal baggage. From hyper-feminist scholars using it as a trump card as a perceived way of winning any argument ever.
Patriarchy. I don't know if you're noticing a theme. Patriarchy.
Yeah, you can
To conservative incels mocking it as a total non-issue that special snowflakes use to garner special attention.
The patriarchy is gone. Women are winning. Men are failing.
To the tongue-in-cheek, humorous approach that makes fun more of the politically correct nature of society rather than actually addressing any real issues associated with the term.
Are you the patriarchy? Oh my God, of course not.
It seems like everyone has a whole bunch of opinions on this one little word. I would argue that the usage of this word in the Barbie movie is done not in spite of the negative connotations of this word, but indeed because of them. Greta Gerwig used this word knowing full well that it would rustle some jimmies, and people fell for it hook, line, and sinker.
The patriarchy.
Oh, the patriarchy. Oh, the patriarchy.
If you take a shot every time Barbie says the word patriarchy, you will pass out before the movie ends.
Most of us have unfortunately already seen the Ben Shapiro tweet where he attempts to deride the Barbie movie by mentioning its quote-unquote unironic usage of the word patriarchy 10 times.
As we'll learn by the use of the word patriarchy no less than 10 times in this film.
And yes, the word patriarchy is said 10 times throughout the movie, but to call those 10 times unironic is just blatantly a lie. The use of the word patriarchy in this movie is multifaceted depending on the situation. Of these 10 times, only 3 of them are used sincerely, and the remaining 7... Yeah, 7. Math class is tough.
Math class is tough. That has drawn fire from those who think Barbie's remark reinforces a stereotype about girls and math.
It's a Barbie joke for you Barbie fans out there. And the remaining 7 are clearly jokes. So, to paint the usage of this word in the movie as an overused, preachy agenda being shoved into the viewer's face is a complete misrepresentation. Rather, it's used as a sort of verbal boogeyman, a nameless, formless villain that takes on whatever negative connotation the individual viewer imposes upon it, whether that be from a cynical point of view or from a feeling of being victimized. For example, someone who has felt victimized by men a lot throughout their life will probably view the term patriarchy as a very real and present danger, whereas a Chad Bro SoundCloud rapper who thinks women should just shut the f up will probably view the term as a buzzword for pro-liberal propaganda, or whatever the hell they think. Either way, the term conjures up very negative feelings in both viewers, but for different reasons. The word patriarchy itself is the bad guy, regardless of what your beliefs are. Most importantly, the fact that this term is more often than not used as the butt of the joke shows that the director's intention is for it to not be revered, but mocked, which apparently a whole lot of people didn't understand. So I want you to decide for yourself. I'm going to show you all 10 instances of the word patriarchy in their entirety, and then you can come to your own conclusions about the quote-unquote woke agenda.
Hey Barbie, thanks to you, there's nothing we girls can't do.
Patriarchy doesn't show up until 42 minutes in, on the cover of a book.
Why didn't Barbie tell me about patriarchy? Which, to my understanding, is where men and horses run everything?
Sure.
You guys are clearly not doing patriarchy very well.
No, no, we're
doing it well, yeah. There you are.
Oh, no.
That went terrible. I need to find somewhere where I can start patriarchy fresh. I just explained to them the immaculate, impeccable, seamless garment of logic that is patriarchy, and they crumbled.
By giving voice to the cognitive dissonance required to be a woman under the patriarchy, you robbed it of its power. Are just better at ruling than the Barbies ever were.
Well, we just took patriarchy and made a patriarchy.
Yeah.
To be honest, when I found out that patriarchy wasn't about horses, I lost interest anyway.
I don't think I'm really good at anything else.
You saved BarbieLand from patriarchy.
That was very much a group effort.
And finally, Ruth brings the whole point of the movie home. That patriarchy is just something that people made up. That it's no more real than Barbie is real, but rather a concept that we can recreate and destroy as we see fit.
Humans make things up like patriarchy and Barbie just to deal with how uncomfortable it is.
So there you have it. All 10 uses of the word patriarchy. 7 of which were obvious jokes, and 4 of which were said by the same character within the span of like 10 seconds. Is it a vicious, anti-men, uber-woke agenda shoved down the viewer's throat, or a tongue-in-cheek through line that eventually reveals a deeper message? You be the judge. Just know that the Shapiros of the world want you to take their word for it without looking deeper into it yourself. The word isn't mentioned here, but listen to the way that Ken describes what he's learned from the real world to the other Kens.
At first, I thought the real world was run by men. And then there was a minute where I thought it was run by horses. But then I realized that horses are just men extenders. basically everything exists to expand and elevate the presence of men.
It's beautiful.
I know.
Barbie's here.
Ken represents every genuinely good guy who doesn't realize that the system he's been born into and is inadvertently reinforcing is harmful. That is, there is no malice there. He just wants his thoughts and feelings to be considered in a world where they weren't previously. He says, elevate the presence of men, not diminish the power of women. And that is the key takeaway. The use of patriarchy in this film is intentionally broad so as to accentuate the fact that it is a societal construct rather than a finite natural occurrence. In other words, humans made it up. And, in his own words, when I found out patriarchy wasn't about horses, I lost interest anyway. Me too, Ken.
Dance moves Barbie, jamming from head to toe.
People love to antagonize the Barbie movie for having the audacity to be PG-13, and then act shocked when it contains PG-13 subject matter.
Directed at kids, it is supposed to be a kids movie. It's rated PG-13. It is not marketed to PG-13.
And I didn't even know it wasn't like PG, but apparently it's PG-13. It's full of suggestive humor.
They've taken something marketed towards children and made it slightly more offensive to my sensibilities, they shriek, having already forgotten all the Harry Potters and Disney movies and Marvel shit that they've taken their kids to see without batting an eye. Let's imagine for a second that parents had absolutely zero control over what media their children consume. That's a ridiculous claim to make, of course, but let's pretend for a second. Their young to adolescent-aged children somehow have the ability to drive to the movie theater and pay for a ticket and see the whole movie without their parents' consent. Maybe they went to see it at a friend's house or something. That's life. Your kids are going to occasionally see something that you, as the parents, don't approve of. That is just a part of growing up. That's literally not the movie's fault at all. If your kid walks in on you jacking off to a porno movie, you're not mad at the porno movie. You're mad at yourself for not blocking the door.
But my kids really want to see it because it's Barbie. They're begging me to let them watch it even though it's PG-13.
Okay, well, that's your problem, and I'm happy for you that your life is so uncomplicated that this is what you think constitutes an actual issue. Your second graders are having active shooter drills at school, and you think a blowjob joke is going to traumatize them? But it's not just that they're pissed at the rating. They're actively painting themselves as the victims in this narrative they're controlling, so they make it seem as though the Barbie movie was sneaky about its sexual humor as a means of somehow purposely tricking parents to taking their young kids, only for the kids to be unknowingly exposed to content that they weren't prepared for. And this could not be farther from the truth.
Yet a series of gay masturbation jokes. Again, is an audience for children. They're talking about beaching each other off.
This clip was literally in the trailers! If you care so much about what kind of content is shown in the movies you take your kids to, wouldn't you at least watch the fucking trailer? You can't claim they're not advertising sexual jokes if there's a sexual joke in the actual advertisement.
To beach me off first, I will beach both of you off at the same time.
Beach both of us off?
Nobody's gonna beach anyone off.
I didn't even know it wasn't like PG.
This movie is too grown up for kids to really be into, and not because it's too sexy or whatever, but because it's not going to hold their attention. It's too long and, ironically, too subtle for at least very young children to be able to follow. And it's not as though Barbie is a particularly current and hip IP amongst today's kids anyway. The majority of the toy references are of toys dating before the early 2000s, yet they insist that this movie is specifically being aimed at current preteens and younger.
This is a movie made for moms and their 7-year-old girls.
Wow, what an inspiring message for impressionable young girls.
Because you're saying to those little girls that go to see this movie.
There aren't a lot of movies that appeal to little girls, and this was one of them, but now it's off the list.
Yeah, you know what young kids growing up in 2023 love? Ryan Gosling jokes about The Godfather and grunge songs from the 90s.
I'm a little bit angry, well...
You fucking morons. They are so upset at the innocuous nature of this film and its message of equality and acceptance that they choose to see scandal where there isn't any. They're so determined to be the victim in this narrative that they're spreading misinformation before having even seen the film. Even when one of their own people begins to suggest that maybe children should be exposed to things that might have a deeper meaning, the rest of them shut that shit down right quick.
I just sort of wonder, when she goes to the real world, is it really ugly? Because there are a lot of things that are really ugly that little girls need to understand. And I'm not saying that this is a good thing, but it might just show people that it is nice to have a man who dotes on you and you have a career and you raise your sisters and you're a really strong woman. And perhaps the real world where men are not so great is not so great.
Well, I'm Latina, Tudor, and so I always pick the high heel, never the Birkenstock. So great to have you both on.
Tudor has strayed from the 4 pre-approved Fox News responses. Tudor's life force will be eliminated upon completion of fear-mongering. Commence jokes about shopping in order to distract the masses.
You know, a lot of parents out there, their kids are excited about the Barbie movie. Thanks for the warning that this is really just another indoctrination vehicle.
It's a great time to be a girl. Barbie!
Throughout the tornado of misinformation surrounding this movie is the claim that it pushes a transgender agenda. Content warning for transphobia.
Feminist cliches and trans grooming that you have ever seen.
Right, one of the Barbies is a trans Barbie, and this is treated totally normally, as though this is a female Barbie. It's up to and including Ryan Gosling hitting on a trans woman, meaning a dude.
If there are women, which is really weird to me because I'm, 77 years old, so.
Being trans isn't talked about at all in this movie. Not once, not one time. The only thing that even comes close is the joke about Barbie and Ken not having genitals, which the construction guys are cool with. The way that gender is treated in this film is that it should be irrelevant to the judgments that we make of others, or we inherently create an us versus them rhetoric. So if the trans agenda they're referring to here is that we should treat people equally, then yeah, I guess. But that says a lot about you that you're so against that.
Just another indoctrination vehicle.
One of the Barbies is played by a trans woman, and there is even a scene where Ryan Gosling's Ken is openly flirting with her character. But this isn't talked about at all during the film at any point, ever. She is treated just like any other Barbie because that's what she is. So these people aren't mad that there is a pro-trans message in the movie, because there isn't one. They're mad because they had the audacity to cast a trans woman playing a character that, along with everybody else in BarbieLand, need I remind you, literally has no genitals.
Transgender Barbie, a disabled Barbie, and a black female president Barbie.
They somehow didn't let anyone know this with the marketing campaign that one of Barbie's main 3 sidekicks is, surprise, surprise, a man. Didn't let anyone know this with the marketing campaign.
Oh yeah, is that why she had her own fucking poster? They don't even try to pretend they've done their research.
They just gave Barbie the Bud Light treatment, which probably looks pretty stupid in retrospect.
But like, if you're mad about trans people existing and being portrayed in the media, you're gonna have to get over it. You're on the wrong fucking side of history and the world is moving on without you, my dude.
God made men men and women women, and there shouldn't be any gender fluidity or...
Well, God's not real, and I am, so do that with that.
Barbie, as lovely as can be.
Of course, if they're mad about the trans people, they're mad about all the gays. Many Christian news sites took it upon themselves to insist that the Barbie movie pushed a gay agenda, including this example from a Christian site called Movie Guide, where they apparently edited their review of the movie after they'd already been cited by other websites and even managed to leave some of the code on the screen. As you can see by these screenshots, the article clearly originally said pushing lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender character stories. But then when you go to the current live version of the article, it looks like they went back after having actually watched the movie and realizing that sexuality wasn't present in the story at all, so they had to change it to just transgender character stories. Which still isn't true, but at least they partially retconned some of their bullshit claims before Pop Pop broke the HTML again. Hilarious. The only example of anything vaguely LGBTQ+ related comes in a brief and very subtle form of storytelling. Namely, Allan.
Allan.
The character of Allan is a testament to this film's use of subtlety and subtext, not only with regard to gender, but to sexuality as well. If they wanted to completely hit us over the head with a gay subplot, they had every opportunity to do so. But instead, the subject is never explicitly talked about, aside from a few jokes that will go over kids' heads. Let me remind you that this isn't a kids' movie and doesn't pretend to be, but for the sake of their shitty argument, let's pretend that it is. Because sexuality is not pertinent to the core story.
Why are you gay?
Allan is an allegory for a gay and or trans character who doesn't fit in completely with either the Kens or the Barbies. And when I say that, I don't mean to imply that being gay is the same thing as being trans. One has to do with who you're attracted to, and the other has to do with your gender expression. I get that. We all get that. I'm simply saying that the character of Allan displays potential characteristics of both gender nonconformity and attraction to another male. So in this case, both terms could potentially be appropriate. There are dozens of Barbies and dozens of Kens, but there is only one Allan. He's shown repeatedly trying to be a part of the group, but he can't seem to make himself heard, and is either avoided or blatantly ignored by the other characters. The very reason that he isn't affected by the patriarchy is because he isn't a Ken or a Barbie. In a very binary society, Allan is neither. He doesn't cheer for the Kens or the Barbies, he just cheers for the other cheerleaders.
Great cheer, Kens.
This is a metaphor for society's perception of there being two genders that one has to fit into, or you're inherently wrong and don't fit within the system.
No Barbie or Ken should be living in the shadows. Or Allan.
He shows a great concern for Ryan Gosling's Ken in particular, to an extent that no other character shows for their fellow doll. This hints at deeper feelings in a subtle enough way that the older audience members can pick up on if they're paying attention, while simultaneously portraying the idea to younger viewers that Allan is particularly caring for his friend. He screams when Ken gets hurt during the beach scene, and is visibly upset when he hears Ken crying at the end of the movie. He also has some sort of connection to the real world already, being that he knows about NSYNC and Jesus Christ.
Turn this song off a great thing!
And is able to feel negative emotions and even cry, unlike any of the other Barbies and Kens who haven't been exposed to the feelings of the real world. Perhaps this is because the child who's playing with him is already experiencing the feelings of isolation that often come with questioning your gender and/or sexuality at a young age.
Off first. I will beat both of you off at the same time.
But you don't even know how to beat yourself off. How are you going to beat both of yourself? That doesn't make sense.
When you look at his story within the context of BarbieLand being a reflection of reality starting from the 1950s, as we'll discuss later, the character of Allan represents the unsung LGBTQ+ heroes that worked alongside women as marginalized members of society since Barbie was invented in 1959. Allan working alongside the Barbies to help save BarbieLand is a direct reflection of the integral role gay people played in the society, even while that very society was determined to keep them swept under the rug. He is treated with the same level of being ignored, judged, and avoided that openly gay people were met with during much of Barbie's history, even though he's crucial to the story. Without him, Gloria and Sasha have no way of finding Barbie at Weird Barbie's house, and potentially wouldn't even have decided to return at all. But his story isn't really concluded in the movie. He doesn't complete a character arc, and the mystery of who he is and how he got to be so unlike everyone else in BarbieLand is left unsolved. They could have made him flaming, but they didn't. They could have made him go into this whole C-plot where he dealt with his unrequited feelings for Ken and resented Barbie for her indifference towards him, or even have all the other Kens and Barbies apologize to him, just like they did to Weird Barbie. But no, he remains forgotten. Because BarbieLand isn't ready for that conversation. Just like the humans that they were created to emulate, they can only learn one lesson at a time.
I'll never get out of here.
It's an amazingly subtle storyline that you could very easily miss. And assuming you were a blowhard caveman afraid that seeing a gay person would turn your child gay, you'd still have nothing to worry about. No young child is going to pick up on the implied romantic feelings of a slightly too long gaze at Ken. They'll just see a sympathetic character who's concerned for his friend. That's assuming the movie has held their attention for that long. Like I said, this is ironically a very grown-up movie.
With All-American Barbie, you get All-American fun.
People love to talk about how much this movie hates men, and they believe this so vehemently, even when presented evidence to the contrary, that it leads me to believe that many of them are repeating what they've heard without actually having seen the movie themselves.
Why does empowering women always have to be about trashing men?
Angry feminist claptrap that alienates men from women.
Every single instance of someone saying this movie hates men is operating under the assumption that the movie unironically thinks BarbieLand is the good version of reality that we should strive for, even though that's literally the most surface level understanding you could possibly have of the message.
Borderline unhinged hatred of men and everything even vaguely associated with them. And the only way to guarantee a peaceful and harmonious society is for women to be put in charge of everything and men to be docile, powerless servants who exist only to please them.
I And that's where so many critics seem to completely miss one of the most important points, if not the most important point of the film. That BarbieLand is not the perfect world that it paints itself to be.
Barbie's message is that the only solution to all this dreadful patriarchal state of affairs is obviously for women to rule the world, and preferably do so on their own without horrible men to ruin it, or ruin them and their lives.
We will talk in detail about BarbieLand in the next section, but for now, think of BarbieLand as Walter White. If you're striving to be like them, you're missing the point of the story.
Holy mother of God!
I like her clothes, her hair, her friends.
Here's the thing. The movie is nothing if not self-aware. The term woke didn't come about into public vernacular until about the 2010s, and to put it as simply as possible, it describes something that is conscious of social issues such as racism, classism, etc. Colloquially, I think when somebody says that something is woke, they mean that it's actively pushing an agenda of equality in such a way that it's obnoxiously over-the-top, self-righteous, unimaginative, or devoid of any deeper substance. I'm looking at you, Velma.
Which white actors are descended from slave owners?
Virtually every piece of modern literature that we would consider a classic has some elements of wokeness to them, in that they subtextually address some sort of social inequality. But we rarely use the term woke to describe them, not only because the term itself is still very new, but because woke carries with it such a negative connotation. The term woke came about because people noticed that the younger generations were actively being more conscious of the words that they spoke and the stereotypes that they perpetuated, which is why older comedians like Jerry Seinfeld don't like to perform at college campuses anymore, because a racist or sexist joke that was considered funny 30 years ago is now considered at best lazy and unimaginative and at worst offensive. As an example, 10 years ago when I was graduating high school,
They ask you how you are, and you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
Trying to convince the public that some people have preferred pronouns other than those they were assigned at birth was literally like pulling teeth. But now, although there certainly are still bigoted people who have trouble with such a concept,
Guess what? Fucking pronouns!
it's much more commonplace now for people in the corporate and academic world to discuss preferred pronouns openly. Nowadays, even job applications will ask you for your preferred pronouns, and even healthcare workers and civil servants will list their pronouns on their ID badges. And this isn't because of some sort of widespread anti-cis straight people agenda like the Tucker Carlsons of the world would have you believe, but because the world is becoming more aware that these are issues that affect millions of people and should therefore be acknowledged and respected. There was a time 50 years ago where being homosexual was considered a mental illness under the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, and obviously we've come a long way from that. So naturally, some of the people who are going to be most adamant about these issues are the ones that are young enough to have never known anything different, because they never grew up in a time before these things were within their collective consciousness. As a result, younger generations will inevitably find some things offensive that older generations find acceptable.
Wait up, you're not hanging that flag in here? Well, of course I am. This flag, Mrs. Devereaux, is not about college football games or quilting bees or fried chicken on Sunday. It is about crosses being burnt on people's lawns today, not in the evil past, Blanche, today.
And therefore, the older generations will look at the younger generation as a bunch of babies who can't deal with the quote-unquote real world.
This is just a flag. To me, this is just a bunch of wonderful family memories. I am not some kind of bigot because I love this flag and I resent that implication.
When in reality, the younger generations are changing the future of what the real world looks like.
You hold on to that one. He's a good one. What did you say?
He's a good one.
Roland, wait.
All of this is to say that when people say that each generation is getting more and more woke, they're kind of right. And that's a good thing, because each generation becomes more aware of social issues to a greater extent than the generations before them, much in the same way we learn more and more about medical science each generation. But what makes the Barbie movie so interesting is that it plays both fields. While it does very much have themes of social equality, it also actively pokes fun at modern society's tendency to sometimes be overly sensitive to the point of misunderstanding their own arguments. Think about Sasha calling Barbie a fascist, for example, a buzzword that we've all heard thrown around the internet a lot. Sasha, being a young teenager growing up in 2023, calls Barbie a fascist because she's heard the term being used colloquially so many times that she misunderstands its actual historical meaning, which causes Barbie despair and confusion because her only understanding of the term comes from its actual literal definition of historical dictatorship and inherent societal hierarchy.
She thinks I'm a fascist? I don't control the railways or the flow of commerce?
And that's not the only example of the Barbie movie being critical to wokeness. Think about how Will Ferrell's CEO character, while well-meaning, rattles off these HR-approved platitudes as a way of preemptively placating the criticisms he thinks Barbie is going to give him.
Listen, I know exactly where you're going with this, and I have to say, I really resent it. We have gender-neutral bathrooms up the wazoo. Every single one of these men love women.
All the while completely misunderstanding the actual issue at hand, and even reverting to some well-practiced sentences that have nothing to do with what they're talking about.
Some of my best friends are Jewish.
And even after he's carefully tiptoed around all of these touchy topics, in a moment of frustration, he uses one of the only words he thinks is still okay to use.
Get in the box, you Jezebel!
And gives a snarky reply when his underlings react negatively.
What, I can't say Jezebel now?
That is the frustration of a 60-something-year-old man who has seen decades of social change slowly ebb away at what is and isn't acceptable to say in the workplace. And even though he's trying his best, he can't seem to appease them. That's genuinely funny, at least to those of us old enough to have encountered the corporate world, because it's relatable and accurate. But this joke isn't woke in and of itself, so much as it's making fun of the extent to which wokeness has changed corporate America. In other words, being woke is part of the joke. Another example is when Gloria picks Sasha up from school and Sasha sees Barbie getting into the Mattel van. Her immediate instinct is to call Barbie a nutjob, but then her social awareness kicks in after the fact and she corrects herself with more politically correct verbiage.
Thank God they arrested that nutjob, that reality-challenged woman.
This joke is actively making fun of teenagers for being overly sensitive in their use of language, even when behind closed doors. The point is, to call the Barbie movie woke is to either misunderstand or flat out ignore these storytelling elements. Yes, the message behind the story is that of self-acceptance and social equality, but it also tells a very clear message that you don't have to police every little thing you say. It acknowledges that we are all kind of sick of the overly sensitive ways that corporations will try to seem inclusive to the point of being pandering. See also, literally any big brand name during Pride Month. So, while I would reserve the term woke for something that is much less self-referential and ironic due to the negative connotations associated with the word, if you must refer to this film as woke, you have to at least acknowledge that it is woke in a tongue-in-cheek, ironic, and non-hostile way. And at that point, you might as well just pick a different word.
We're into Barbie!
Dolls each sold separately.
And now we come to my two greatest loves, Trixie and Katya, to address a criticism that I see in nearly every review of this film.
And we have to remember, this is a PG-13 film that, let's be honest, at the end of the day, it is a commercial for a product. It is. So we're watching we pay to watch a commercial for a product where they sell us toys. I mean, yes, it's a movie about a product.
Upon first glance, it's very easy to dismiss this film as just a commercial or just a product placement. Because yes, it is about a product that is in the public space. And yes, they made an enormous amount of money off of it. Mostly from me. But that doesn't detract from its actual merit as a film. If you don't believe me, let's talk about the Super Mario Bros. Movie. The Super Mario Bros. Movie is the third highest grossing animated film of all time. It came out in April of 2023, and it was the highest grossing movie of 2023 by a lot, before Barbie came along in July and made it look like a little bitch. Super Mario Bros. Was fun, it had a huge budget, and visually it looked great, but there was absolutely no substance behind it. My family and I all took my little nephews to go see it, and we all liked it. We all had a good time. But that's it. It challenged absolutely nobody's thinking. It had nothing new to say. They showed the entirety of the movie in the trailer, and the whole thing was neatly wrapped up in a little journey from point A to point B, with all of the Mario characters showing up and doing the little Mario Kart thing, and then doing the Smash Brothers thing, and it's basically the same kids movie that we've all seen a million times before. The only real change they made was that Luigi is the one that has to be saved, because Peach is of course too #girlboss to ever be saved by a man. So instead, she's the hot manic pixie dream girl that shows up to teach Mario how to not be useless.
Watch and learn. He won't even notice it probably, because you're very, very small.
They knew what they were doing. They knew. They knew. Sure, for a little while, everyone, including myself, was singing the Jack Black's Peaches song, but that's because everyone loves Jack Black and Tenacious D, and someone at Universal said, hey, there's a whole bunch of kids who don't know what Tenacious D is, why don't we just have him do that, and then we'll put Bowser's face on top of it? Just do that? Do that? Yeah. And because the song itself subverted our expectations for the rest of the movie enough that it was a pleasant surprise, it worked. Now let's look at the Barbie movie in comparison. Barbie has a greater overarching narrative about how the meaning of things can change over time, how something that can be meant to inspire and empower can actually end up doing the opposite, how human nature compels us to search for answers to questions that no one can ultimately have the answers to, and how our own perception of our self-worth can distort everything that happens to us. Barbie goes so far as to challenge the audience's perception of the very brand itself, and to bring up the negative aspects of the brand over time. It uses real toys that many people are intimately familiar with from their childhood, and uses them as a means to convey a greater message. There are little Easter eggs all over the place, but besides a few references that directly interact with the story, such as the discontinued dolls at Weird Barbie's house, none of them beat you over the head with it or take away from the actual storytelling. The story of the characters, and the inner conflict within each of them, is what ultimately drives the story. The same can't be said of Mario Brothers, where we gotta go save Luigi, and a bunch of goofy Mario stuff happens in the meantime. He doesn't like mushrooms, you guys. That is good. I'm not just trying to shit on the Mario movie, I'm simply using it as an example of an actual product placement movie. In other words, there certainly are movies out there that serve no other purpose than to sell merchandise and get children's asses in theater seats. And I'm not suggesting even for a moment that Warner Brothers went into the Barbie movie not intending to make money off of it. I'm simply saying that in a filthy capitalist society where there is no such thing as ethical consumption, we have two types of blockbusters based on existing intellectual properties. Ones that don't put in the effort to introduce something new to the mass consciousness, and ones that do. Call it artistic integrity if you want, but to say that the Barbie movie is just a commercial for a product is to vastly, vastly oversimplify it, and to clump it in with a whole lot of movies that tried a whole lot less.
Barbie, we're going out.
People like to claim that this movie has an anti-mother, anti-traditional gender roles message.
They're bashing the baby dolls and saying we don't have to be mothers.
Utterly despise men and masculinity, or any kind of traditional gender roles of any kind.
Mommy dolls are bad and insufficient. But then they criticize Mattel for discontinuing a mommy doll named Midge. But hold on, you just said that dolls about motherhood are bad.
The outrage from pregnant Midge back in 2003 came from the misunderstanding that she was an unmarried teen mother, leading to the second wave of dolls including a little silver wedding ring on her hand. But even so, parents complained that the subject of pregnancy was too adult for the kids, and the doll was eventually discontinued. Because parents were mad, not because they thought mothers are gross or whatever. She's not creepy because she's portraying a mother, she's creepy because she has a hollow plastic belly with magnets in it and a plastic baby that rattles around in there. I know because I had her.
Nothing strange about that.
But what about the opening scene where the little girls smash their baby dolls? They're saying little girls shouldn't want to be mothers. Not at all.
This is simply an artistic retelling of what actually happened when Barbie was created in 1959, and the role that Barbie played in giving little girls the ability to dream of doing things besides being mothers.
For her generation, for the most part, once you became a Mrs., you gave up your identity, stopped living your life, and you ended up living the life of your husband and ultimately the life of your children.
The message isn't that women shouldn't want to be mothers, but that it shouldn't be expected of them as their only option, as it was when Barbie was first invented. The movie doesn't portray a negative view of motherhood so much as it illustrates the struggle that women have juggling being a mother with other aspects of their lives, and the level of dedication that being a mother requires.
It's anxiety. I have it too. They're just awful at this age.
I feel amazing.
That's because kids don't take it out on the dads.
You're supposed to love being a mother, but don't talk about your kids all the damn time.
I'm just a boring mom with a boring job and a daughter who hates me. Can you blame me for wanting to have a little fun? Because I never get to do anything. I didn't even go on that cruise I won at your school raffle because I didn't have enough vacation days and your dad's allergic to sun. Oh.
The negative emotions that Gloria feels are due to her relationship with her daughter, which then transfer to Barbie and sets us up for the conflict of the story. She explicitly says that it's okay to just want to be a mom, or to be a mom and something else, or to not be a mom at all. The whole point of this part of the story is that there are multiple ways of living your life, and none of them is necessarily right or wrong. Ruth Handler herself states the level of dedication and self-sacrifice that mothers have for their kids. She says, "We mothers stand still so our daughters can see how far they've come." The real Ruth Handler had a rather turbulent relationship with her own daughter, Barbara, whom she named Barbie after.
Well, the inspiration for the doll came from observing my own daughter Barbara play.
We used to go into the dime store and buy paper dolls, adult-type paper dolls, and she was role-playing her dream of her teenage years, and she was also with her friends, projecting her vision of the adult world around her. And I used to think, my goodness, if you could three-dimensionalize that play pattern, you'd have something.
I didn't know they were naming a doll after me until suddenly the doll was out and named, and everybody was coming up to me about it.
She was very confused. She had very mixed emotions, to put it mildly.
I really didn't like it at the beginning because I couldn't adjust to it. People are running up to me and asking for autographs, and I couldn't understand why.
But you, at one time, made me quit calling you Barbie.
And their daughter, Barbara, says she's finally gotten over the sibling rivalry she felt for her namesake, Barbie.
She and Barbara both spoke at length about the resentment Barbara felt towards her mother for being so dedicated to the company during her upbringing.
I think Barbara resented it very much through the years because all her friends' parents were available. She used to ask me why I had to be different than everybody else, and that really hurt me.
Barbara discussed it in multiple interviews, while Ruth herself described her lack of motherly and housewifely intuition in her autobiography.
I loved my children, but I wasn't suited to taking care of a home.
I had 2 kids, and I was bored as hell staying home.
I loved being a mother, but I was fit to be tied with staying home. I hated that. Knowing how to cook and keeping a good house. Oh, shit, it was awful.
The creator of Barbie herself was a mother, and an imperfect one at that. But it was Ruth's goal of revolutionizing how her daughter could play and imagine her future that led to Barbie's very creation. Greta Gerwig explicitly calls this movie a mother-daughter movie, which we'll talk about later in the themes section.
Please, call me mother.
No, thank you.
Now that we have the misinformation peanut gallery out of the way, it's time to get to the fun stuff. We're finally ready to get into the movie itself.
When they started going south and having atheists direct the movie.
Barbie, awesome. Looking good from head to toe.
While criticisms of Mattel, or commoditized consumerism, or even the ethics of current filmmaking as an industry are absolutely important conversations to have, that's not what we're here to talk about in this video. We're here to look at the film as a standalone piece of art. First, we're going to start off with a 90-second history lesson, where we're going to find out exactly who Barbie is, besides just the official favorite toy of Gilbert Gottfried.
As far as I'm concerned, Barbie is my favorite toy.
So then we're going to talk about philosophy and inspirations. We'll briefly discuss the director's intentions, as well as the influence of cinematic history and philosophical schools of thought that led to the Barbie movie becoming what it is. BarbieLand versus the real world, and the role that they play in the story, and what they are and are not supposed to represent. Themes of the movie. What the movie is ultimately about. specifically the underlying aspects of the film's message that many people seem to overlook. Soundtracks, costumes, and set design. Pretty much everyone, even the people who hated this movie, all agree that these aspects of the film are fantastic, so I'm not going to focus as much just for the sake of not rehashing.
Barbie, you're really my best friend.
Ruth Handler and a high school sweetheart husband, Elliot, co-founded a toy company called Mattel in 1945. During a time in which the only dolls available were baby dolls, Ruth noticed her young daughter playing with cutout paper dolls and immediately recognized a gap in the market. During a trip to Europe in 1956, Ruth discovered an adult novelty doll called Bill Lilly that she would then take back with her to the United States, redesigned her a little bit, and bing bang boom, Barbie. Barbie, named after Ruth's daughter Barbara, was a hit amongst little girls, but the ultra-conservative parents of the 1950s were horrified that she had breasts, so Ruth came up with an ingenious marketing tactic, focused on the idea that playing with Barbie would teach a young girl how to groom herself and eventually find a husband, which in those times was perceived as a woman's only way of survival. All of a sudden, she was flying off the shelves. Barbie's evolution over the decades directly correlates with the women's liberation movement. For example, Barbie was originally given full-face makeup with some serious side-eye because back then women were meant to be demure and polite and not make eye contact until the 1970s hit and society was recreating its ideas of what it meant to be a woman. And Malibu Barbie showed up with hashtag no makeup, looking you straight in the eyes. Meanwhile, she was keeping herself busy with her dozens of different careers, many times before women in the real world were widely able to get more than secretarial or teaching jobs. Barbie literally planted the seeds in little girls' brains that they deserved a house and a career and autonomy just like anyone else. Although Barbie's full history is tumultuous and certainly not free of criticism, throughout the years she is a direct reflection of society in which she was created, a tangible physical snapshot to what was happening in pop culture at any given time. Ruth Handler would eventually resign from Mattel in 1975 following a tax fraud investigation and would go on to start a breast prosthetics company after being diagnosed with breast cancer and undergoing a double mastectomy, showing once again her resilience to innovate in the face of adversity. She was eventually invited back to Mattel for a ceremony in her honor, headed by the then female CEO of the company, who presented her with an award and called Ruth her hero. Ruth eventually died in 2002, aged 85, having lived a life knowing that she created something in Barbie that touched millions of lives and still continues to do so to this day. I had to skip over a lot of good stuff, so if you're interested, check out the other resources to find out more. But now that we have a little bit of background, we're ready to deep dive into the movie. Philosophy and Inspirations. If I were to pinpoint the two most prevalent philosophical elements of the Barbie movie, they would be absurdist humor and existentialism. Wait, weren't we just talking about dolls and boobs? I know, but just stay with me. It's gonna make sense, okay? So what do all these words mean? Per the Merriam-Webster dictionary, absurdism is a philosophy based on the belief that the universe is irrational and meaningless, and that the search for order brings the individual into conflict with the universe. Existentialism, per Merriam-Webster, analysis of individual existence is an unfathomable universe and the plight of the individual who must assume ultimate responsibility for acts of free will without any certain knowledge of what is right and wrong or good or bad. Existentialism focuses on the impact of a meaningless world on the individual, and the individual's attempts to create and assign meaning to the world around them. Absurdism and existentialism share one major commonality: the idea that there is no inherent meaning to anything, also known as nihilism. The Barbie backpack decided it didn't want to stay up there anymore, so it's just gonna chill there from now on. Existentialism takes the concept of nihilism, the lack of inherent meaning, but rather than suggest that meaning doesn't exist at all, as a true nihilist would, existentialism suggests that it's up to the individual to create their own meaning or purpose. Under existentialism, the answer to what is the meaning of life is literally whatever you want it to be. So when people talk about having an existential crisis, they are referring specifically to the feeling of not knowing what their purpose in life is, or indeed what the meaning to anything is.
She's not dead, she's just having an existential crisis.
TLDR, nothing has any inherent meaning besides the meaning that we human beings assign it. The desire to assign meaning to our lives and the world around us is called existentialism. Got it? Fabulous. Moving on. So we know what existentialism is. We know what absurdism is. Expanding on absurdism is absurdist humor, also called surreal humor, surreal comedy, or absurdist comedy. Absurdist humor is a type of comedy that comes from subverting the viewer's expectations and violating preconceived notions and logical reasoning. Monty Python and Young Frankenstein, or regular show, if you're too young to be familiar with either of those, whippersnappers, are great examples of absurdist comedies. Comedies where part of the joke is how out of left field the concepts are, or how illogical the premise of the conflict is.
Weird, I know. Best if you don't think about it too much.
Order backward or
Don't overthink it.
Oh, okay.
Is BarbieLand like an alternate reality, or is it like a place where your imagination...
Yes.
Okay.
The key takeaway from this is that the conflict in the Barbie movie isn't supposed to be realistic in its execution. Although it deals with very real and very poignant themes, it doesn't pretend that it has to reach those themes in a way that feels natural or logical. We're going to talk a lot more about this later, but for now, keep this idea of absurdist humor in a little post-it note in your brain. Greta Gerwig was interviewed by Letterboxd, during which she gave us a list of 33 movies that directly inspired her when making the Barbie movie. And it's a really interesting read for film buffs trying to get into the mind of a director who clearly has a passion for the art of filmmaking as a whole. In looking through these 33 movies, you'll notice there's a particular genre that comes up repeatedly: soundstage musicals. Film adaptations of Broadway musicals such as Oklahoma, Singing in the Rain, Wizard of Oz, and all that jazz. I'm gonna rouge my knees and boom my style. Particularly, she mentions a certain authentically artificial quality that cinematic adaptations of these musicals have, a description she uses again in an interview with The Gentlewoman. Quote, "What we've come to with Barbie is that it's authentically artificial. It's a catchphrase that seemed to apply to everything. That it's fake, but it's really fake. Like a painted sky." Referring to The Wizard of Oz, which is even shown on the marquee of the theater in BarbieLand, Gerwig states, "The Wizard of Oz does something that I wanted to emulate. These incredible sound stages and these painted skies, and this sense of, I say, authentically artificial, which I think is very beautiful and emotional. I think of the painted backdrop of the Emerald City as they go towards it." The Wizard of Oz parallels come up frequently throughout the movie.
What about Barbie?
What do you mean?
Hey! What about Dorothy? Yes, how about Dorothy?
Yeah, Dorothy next. What do you want?
Yeah, Dorothy,
I'm not really sure where I belong anymore.
Well, I don't think there's anything in that black bag for me.
Will Ferrell's character is a direct parallel to the wizard, a mysterious mentor at the end of a long journey whom the characters depend on to give them answers, but ultimately has none to give, leading the main characters to realize that they had the ability within themselves all along.
Tell me your secret dream, child.
At the very end of the movie, just as Ruth Handler is showing Barbie what it means to be human, we cut to Barbie breathing air into her lungs as we see her golden heart necklace, just like the heart-shaped pocket watch and golden medallion the Tin Man and Cowardly Lion received from the wizard. Referring to her favorite movie, Singin' in the Rain, quote, "It's cinematic, but at the same time it feels like it's being performed for an audience. The structure of musicals is like that, and it was on sets, and it didn't feel like I was looking at lives that were being lived. It felt like I was being performed for. I think the cinema of it all feels like sets to me, and it was sets. So in some ways, I transposed the theater experience onto it. It's through this lens of authentic artificiality that we begin to see the Barbie movie as it was truly intended. Even in its least campy moments, the performances are larger than life, yet succinct, as is the case in musical theater. The audience is meant to feel as though these performances are being done intentionally and for their benefit, rather than in typical cinema, where the audience is meant to be a fly on the wall, watching these characters without the characters' knowledge. The inner thoughts of the characters are frequently depicted as tangential soliloquies, not serving to actually further the plot, but instead to give us a glimpse into the character's emotional state. Think of the clinical depression Barbie commercial and how it doesn't necessarily fit into either the real world or BarbieLand's narrative. Or, of course, the I'm Just Ken scene, where we intermittently cut away from what's quote-unquote really happening on the beach to a giant formless environment with no furniture and no backgrounds and nothing to distract you from the pure emotion of the character. Gerwig even mentions that the I'm Just Ken scene was directly inspired by a ballet scene in Singin' in the Rain, where we're taken into a dream sequence and then even deeper into a second dream sequence within the first one, where the male dancer is essentially so captivated by the female dancer and everything else drifts away and he's powerless to do anything but be tangled up in her female wiles. Everything in a soundstage musical and in the Barbie movie is grandiose and exaggerated, meant to emulate reality without going so far as to assume it's an accurate depiction of it. And this is true not only of BarbieLand, but of the real world as well. And this is where I think a lot of people get confused. Look at the scene where Barbie and Ken first arrive in the real world, where the soundstage props make it clear to those of us paying attention that we are still very much in the world of the theatrical. The mountain backdrops of the traveling montage are seamlessly integrated into the beach scene, even going so far as to have graffiti on the mountains themselves. And there are even set pieces that serve no actual functional purpose within the universe, such as concrete pillars that lead to nowhere but serve to clue the audience in on information about the current setting and evoke the feeling of an industrial cityscape. This is something that happens frequently in stage musicals and traditional theater, where elaborate sets are limited and set pieces have to be mobile enough to be easily moved in between scenes. All of this is to say that this film, the entire film, not just BarbieLand, is absurdist. The real world isn't meant to be representative of the actual real world as we know it, but as a caricature in and of itself. For example, the version of Venice Beach that we see here is frankly too pretty to be realistic. If this were an accurate depiction of a beach in California, we would be seeing hypodermic needles, used condoms, and fast food trash literally everywhere. And there would be at least 1 or 2 tents visible from a camp of unhoused people. Even the behavior of the other characters are so over the top as to not be realistic. In the movie, people gawk and stare at Barbie and Ken, and even directly tease them.
Give us a smile, Blondie!
One ghastly man shouts, "Give us a smile, Blondie," which is a phrase that hasn't actually been used in the real world since probably the Second World War.
But in reality, everyone would be staring at their phones or too engaged in their own conversations to have this big of a reaction. If you saw someone dressed like this in California, you wouldn't stare at them as though they were from another planet. You would just assume they were making a TikTok or doing an 80s themed Instagram photo shoot or something. You might give them a quick side-eye glance or quietly point them out to your friend, but you wouldn't gather a whole group of Abercrombie and Fitch Chad friends to antagonize them. Here's another example. Think about the way that the construction workers and the police characters objectify Barbie. The construction workers are literally so stereotypically misogynistic that the second they see Barbie, they all rattle off their cheesy pickup lines simultaneously, as if they're NPCs she just walked up to in Skyrim all at once.
Yoo-hoo! Oh, you got fries with that
If I said you had a hot body, would you hold it against me?
Is that a mirror in your pocket?
Baby, you are an
I can see myself in your shorts.
I don't know. I've seen this movie probably 10 times by now, and that makes me laugh every single time.
Love me a leotard.
I love the elbow pads.
In case anyone doesn't know, that is not how cops act when they're booking someone.
She looks even better in more clothes.
Because you can imagine more.
Huh. I guess my middle school youth pastor was right. These little side gags aren't just throwaway jokes for the sake of humor, but a clue to the audience that the reality that we're seeing is fantastical in nature. Do you think the real CEO of Mattel acts like Will Ferrell, playing with his little pink drumsticks, or talking about female agency, or getting into tickle fights with his board of directors? Of course not. His entire character, along with the dull Orwellian corporate landscape of the Mattel office, is meant to show that the universe we're watching is a caricature of the real world rather than the real world itself. If this were a real corporate office, they would be doing everything they could to avoid looking like this. Everyone would be sitting on giant yoga balls, there would be tons of little kitschy #GoodVibesOnly signs on people's desks, and an ass-kissing HR rep would be talking about work-life balance while simultaneously denying your PTO request. We even get a chase scene a la Scooby-Doo, where everyone is doing an exaggerated jogging-in-place sort of motion, and the corporate drones are literally looking straight ahead and barely missing Barbie, complete with cartoon sound effects. Will Ferrell as the CEO character is deceptively nuanced, especially considering how goofy he seems on first glance. Mattel obviously owns not only the Barbie brand, but the movie itself is a licensed Mattel property, so they couldn't make him too evil or they would risk casting their own brand in a bad light. Greta Gerwig herself mentions that she was surprised Mattel approved of her script at all, presumably since the company ultimately serves as an obstacle to Barbie rather than as an asset. Well, that, and because the script doesn't exactly hold back on Barbie's shortcomings.
You represent everything wrong with our culture.
Because the main conflict of the Barbie movie is internal, within the self, rather than external, within the environment, this sort of gray area of Will Ferrell's character actually works to the movie's benefit. Will Ferrell isn't a villain so much as a catalyst for Barbie to continue searching for answers on her own. So, rather than serve as either a hero turned villain or a well-meaning voice of reason who has seen these events unfold before, they essentially have him sort of playing both at the same time. There's certainly plenty of social commentary present in the visual of men trapping Barbie inside of a box, but also in the uber politically correct sound bites that Will Ferrell spouts off at Barbie's insinuation that there are no women working at Mattel.
Every single one of these men love women.
He serves to show that Barbie, and by extension the viewer, can't rely on others to determine who they are for them, or they risk being compartmentalized and expected to never stray away from that imposed depiction of themselves. Or the box, if you will. So anyway, we've determined that the real world and BarbieLand are both equally, if not equally, then comparably, theatrical and tongue-in-cheek.
After all, they're living in BarbieLand. Who am I to burst their bubble?
Part of the confusion that comes from a lot of this movie's critics comes from the misconception that we, the viewer, are supposed to view BarbieLand the same way the Barbies do, as the correct reality, the good version of the real world that is flawed and dangerous. No one is sad in BarbieLand, no one ever gets old, no one ever has any real problems. If anyone ever gets hurt, all they have to do is get a little sticker X-ray and all of a sudden they're healed. BarbieLand is a reflection of the young girls in the real world, and their attempts to make the world around them make sense and feel safe enough to explore their future ambitions.
Do giant hands come in and play with you?
No, that's crazy.
From a psychological standpoint, the act of playing isn't just a fun way to pass the time. For children, it's an incredibly important facet of not only their fine motor skills, but also their emotional and social development.
Play is actually the work of a child, in which they are preparing themselves for adult roles and for society at large. And children play with toys in an unstructured manner in order to create and actively engage in their physical environment to build knowledge.
They're kind of exploring uncertainty. They're taking themselves beyond what they know and understand and into what they're curious about and want to find out about.
It's how they learn, it's how they develop new ideas, new skills, and they use them in this safe environment.
The way that a child plays with their toys is a direct reflection of how they see the world from their point of view of limited understanding.
Sure, I was just recreating whatever ridiculous things were going on in my family. My father was a doctor. He would come home from work and he would say, I'm exhausted, and Barbie would say, well, you got to get dressed because we're going to a party. And Ken would say, I just saved 8 people from fatal heart attacks. Don't you women know I'm exhausted? And he would bash her, and she would bash him back, and there'd be screaming and yelling. And Francie, who was me, would always come out, and she would sort of try to get in the middle, and then they'd both bash Francie. The Barbie world was kind of my way of figuring out how I want to do a family, because I didn't really necessarily like the one that I was in.
BarbieLand is meant to represent the controlled and compartmentalized version of an idealistic reality through the eyes of a child, not through the eyes of an adult who already has the wherewithal to understand concepts like gender equality and capitalism and building structure.
When you're playing with Barbies, nobody bothers to walk them down the stairs and out the door, etc. You just pick them up and put them where you want them to go. You better fly, girl, yeah. You use your imagination.
It's only once the complicated feelings of the real world begin to creep into BarbieLand, not the negative thoughts and feelings of a child, mind you, but of an adult who knows better, Gloria, that Barbie, the character, begins to feel these negative emotions herself.
We're all being played with, babe.
The absurdist nature of this film hints at the unsettling nature of BarbieLand, literally within the first few moments of watching the Barbies and Kens interact.
Hi, Barbie. Hi, Barbie. Hi, Barbie.
Hi, Barbie.
Hi, Barbie.
Hi, Barbie.
Hi, Barbie.
Hi, Ken.
Look at the way Barbie's eyes dart anxiously back and forth here, with her iconic smile plastered on her face. Within the context of the film, this serves not only as a nod to the audience that this is a campy, tongue-in-cheek universe, but also that it may not be all it appears to be. The Barbies might think of BarbieLand as a perfect, ideal world, but that is not how we're supposed to interpret it as a viewer. We're meant to see the unequal treatment the Kens get under the rule of the Barbies, and vice versa. We are meant to see the manufactured, unfeeling nature of a world where everything looks as though it was churned out from the exact same factory, because it literally was. We're meant to see the shallow, surface-level connections that the characters make with one another because they have no concept of hardship or sorrow.
Hi, Barbie. Hi, Barbie. Hi, Barbie. Hi, Barbie.
We are meant to see the stagnant life of a world completely devoid of change.
I've never wanted anything to change.
Oh, honey, that's life. It's all change.
That's terrifying.
Mama needs a little something extra to keep me going. There's nothing else in this. I've been sober for 3 years. It's not until we return to BarbieLand that Ken, of all people, unintentionally explains precisely why BarbieLand is not ideal.
And if it weren't for these technicalities like MBAs, medical degrees, and I don't know, swim lessons, I could have ruled that world.
Meaning that in the real world, you have to have credentials and knowledge and experience in order to be put in a position of power. Well, theoretically. The message to the viewer is that we should do away with gendered constructs present in both worlds, the female-driven BarbieLand and the male-driven real world. That an individual's merit should be determined by their actions, attitudes, and know-how, rather than by their gender. To do anything else is harmful to everyone, and inherently pits them against one another, just like the Kens and the Barbies.
Please, just leave me here. Just leave me go back to your messed up world and just leave me to mine.
So, no. BarbieLand is not a paradise. This just in, life in plastic is truly not fantastic.
BarbieLand needs saving. Barbie needs saving.
And, in an unprecedented moment of social progress, even President Barbie acknowledges that the way they were doing things before was toxic and deserves to be changed.
I don't think that things should go back to the way that they were. No Barbie or Ken should be living in the shadows.
The future of humanity lies not in BarbieLand, not in the current quote-unquote real world, but in a theoretical future that we, the audience, must create without gender discrimination. So yeah, let me just, come here, I just want to talk to you. Any Ben Shapiro types that tell you that this movie encourages a man-hating, totalitarian, pro-female agenda?
This is an assault on not just Ken, but all men.
This is a movie made by people who utterly despise men and masculinity. Men and everything they do are utterly irredeemably shit.
Men are really bad. Women need to separate off from men and hate men in order to be unblinded to the patriarchy.
Has completely, utterly, and absolutely missed the entire point. Which leads us into our next section, themes. Talking about the way you're walking, moving, grooving, Barbie. So there are 5 major recurring themes in the Barbie movie. Ideology and meaning, generational progress, expectations, self-acceptance and actualization, and beauty and imperfection, which I know sounds like a crazy long one, but I'll explain, and gender equality. Ideology and meaning. Barbie, working it, you got move. So if somebody put a big pink gun to my head and said, what is the one main theme of the Barbie movie? I would have to probably say the change of ideology and meaning over time. We talked about the principle of existentialism, that there is no absolute meaning to anything besides what people assign to it. And this is crucial to understand because since human beings are subject to change, meaning is subject to change. Think of how much the word slut has evolved in the past 100 years. A word that started off with a single negative connotation given the societal environment. Then, as our views of sexuality began to change, slut became a word that could still be used maliciously, but could also be used as a fondly teasing name for a close friend or a flirty term of endearment you use for a friend.
I've even slept with this guy. You big slut! Good for you! Yay!
And this is an example of semantic change, when the meaning of words change over time. To put it another way, think of the pentagram symbol. 100 years ago, it was absolutely terrifying. It was a very real depiction of the totally real devil who everyone totally believed in. But now, although there are still some people who are still afraid of it, the rest of us have figured out that it's just a cool series of shapes and lines that look really cool on a cutesy Hot Topic t-shirt. Myself included. This example with the pentagram is an example of a change in ideology, ideas that are specific to an individual, group, or culture. Semantic change and ideological change are both examples of how meaning can change over time. Why, yes, I am almost 30. Thank you for noticing. Barbie herself is not a real person. She's an idea.
How are you here? You're like an idea. A great idea.
Barbie, the cultural icon, the imaginary public figure that she is, her meaning and her role in society have changed over time. And oh, fuck me, don't you even try it. Her meaning, her role in society has changed over time. This concept of ideology is present literally within the first seconds of the film.
Yes, Barbie changed everything. Then she changed it all again. All of these women are Barbie, and Barbie is all of these women.
This communicates to us immediately that Barbie is not an individual here, but rather a representative of many. It tells the audience, we're talking about Barbie abstractly here, not as a single character.
She might have started out as just a lady in a bathing suit, but she became so much more.
And this is where our 90-second history lesson comes in handy. This line is referencing the first ever Barbie doll that Ruth Handler based off of built Lily, which was dressed in her iconic black and white striped swimsuit.
She has her own money, her own house, her own car, her own career.
The original ideology of Barbie is clearly stated in this opening monologue.
Because Barbie can be anything, women can be anything.
Again, Barbie planted the seeds in children's minds that women were just as capable as men, during a time when the real world was not reflecting that yet.
And this has been reflected back onto the little girls of today, in the real world. Girls can grow into women who can achieve everything and anything they set their mind to.
This was the true meaning of Barbie. Female empowerment, imagination, and innovation. Even so, this is where we get our first hint that things might not be so simple.
Thanks to Barbie, all problems of feminism and equal rights have been solved. At least, that's what the Barbies think.
But despite Barbie the idea's original intention, Barbie the character gets a rude awakening by Sasha and her friends, a more current voice of the people. The generation who have never lived without the internet, who are conscientious of things like capitalism and the environment, and who have the gift of hindsight of several decades of information weaved seamlessly into their day-to-day lives. A generation that may have played with Barbie long ago, but have since moved on.
So you're like Barbie, like a professional bimbo?
No, Barbie's not a bimbo. Barbie is a doctor and a lawyer and a senator and a Nobel Prize winner.
You're a Nobel Prize winner?
Oh, no, not me, but Barbie is, yeah.
Sasha hits the main bullet points of Barbie's major criticisms pretty succinctly.
You've been making women feel bad about themselves since you were invented. You represent everything wrong with our culture. Sexualized capitalism, unrealistic physical ideals.
No.
You set the feminist movement back 50 years. You destroy girls' innate sense of worth, and you are killing the planet with your glorification of rampant consumerism.
Barbie tries to argue that Sasha is describing something stereotypical and not the overall concept of Barbie, but Sasha's having none of it. This entire scene demonstrates the change of ideology and meaning over time. Where Barbie at one point was this symbol of feminine power, she has, over time, grown to mean something entirely different. A symbol of body dysmorphia and unrealistic affluence, unattainable perfection, and harmful uber-feminine ideals. It's important to understand these criticisms of Barbie, at least broadly, in order to understand one of the key components of the movie's message. Mainly that Barbie gets a disproportionate amount of criticism heaped on her simply because she's so unabashedly female. Intellectual properties typically enjoyed by women are scrutinized more extensively than those that are typically enjoyed by men. There is an inherent bias that society has against media marketed towards women, which young women and femme-presenting people absolutely internalize from a very young age.
Oh, come off it. Everybody hates women. Women hate women and men hate women. It's the one thing we can all agree on. Is that true?
It's not the job of the Barbie movie to say these criticisms don't hold water, but rather to ask, would we be picking it apart to this extent if it weren't based on women?
There are issues with women and feminism that human beings haven't solved. So why a plastic doll can do it, I'm still unclear. Feminism and how a girl sees herself and self-esteem for girls. To put that all on the tiny plastic shoulders of an 11.5-inch doll is quite a burden.
And if all of that is also true for a doll, just representing a woman, then I don't even know.
Of course Barbie is deserving of criticism. Look how pink she is. Nobody's that pink in real life. Nobody goes to their boring accounting job with a hot pink briefcase and a dazzling smile. This is just escapism for cute little girls who will never actually be taken seriously in the real world. Stupid pink girls with their makeup and their emotions. Let's let them have their little dolls so they can dream of having bodily autonomy someday. It's laid out for us, in no uncertain terms, that Barbie has the deck stacked against her simply for being female. This is illustrated to us perfectly in Gloria's monologue to the Barbies.
It is literally impossible to be a woman. And it kills me that you don't think you're good enough. Like, we have to always be extraordinary. But somehow we're always doing it wrong. I'm just so tired of watching myself and every single other woman tie herself into knots so that people will like us.
And it's this moment in the film where the message of changing ideology becomes clear. We, all of us human beings, have the potential to take any ideology we don't like and change it.
By giving voice to the cognitive dissonance required to be a woman under the patriarchy, you robbed it of its power.
We can take the anti-feminist rhetoric that has attached itself to the Barbie brand, and by extension, anything, and decide that it's no longer relevant. That Barbie actually stands for empowerment and equality and self-actualization in the face of hardship. We can take things that have historically had a negative connotation and turn them into something new and positive.
Because Barbie can be anything, women can be anything.
Ideology and meaning are ever-changing, and it's because we have the ability to look back at our collective history as a society that we are capable of making more informed decisions in the future. It also makes us capable of acknowledging cognitive dissonance, meaning that something can represent two contradictory things at the same time. Because ideology is always expanding, things like Barbie can have multiple meanings, and that's okay. Barbie can simultaneously represent both the cynical, over-sexualized face of capitalism and your beloved doll from your childhood that gave you the first glimpse of what you wanted to be when you grew up. There's enough room in our collective consciousness for her to be both, and potentially even more as society develops along with her.
I like Pilot Barbie, because that's what I want to be when I grow up.
Barbie's the only doll that can sit front row at fashion shows and be the subject of feminist theory classes and create such polarizing dialogue in culture.
Barbie was pretty much everything the feminist movement was trying to escape from.
I want to be a part of the people that make meaning, not the thing that's made. I want to do the imagining. I don't want to be the idea.
Ultimately, the Barbie movie shows a great appreciation for both humanity, which individually has a maximum of about 80 years on the planet, and ideas, which can go on forever and continue changing for as long as they stay within our consciousness. This appreciation of meaning over time brings us to our next major theme, generational progress.
B-A-R-B-I-E. That's so Barbie.
Anyone who's ever tried to explain how to use a smartphone to an older relative knows how big the difference between generations can be. But seriously, part of what has made Barbie, the brand, the icon, stay relevant in society for as long as she has is her ability to adapt to stay palatable to each generation. As we mentioned in our 90-second history lesson, since Barbie's been around for as long as she has, her multiple iterations serve as snapshots of American life through the years. And because of this, you can literally look through a comprehensive list of the Barbies throughout the decades and watch as women become more and more integral to society. While Barbie started off as being too controversial with her breasts to be sold to the 1950s consumers, by the 60s she had all the typical careers that women were allowed to have back then, such as, flight attendants, ballerinas, teachers, that sort of stuff. And by the 70s, she was a suntanned doctor with no makeup looking you directly in the eye. With each generation, women were becoming more and more powerful, and therefore so was Barbie.
And I think Malibu Barbie occupies the same place in the Barbie canon as Monet's Olympia in the world of art history. The female depicted in an image never looked directly at the viewer. You know, there was always a sidelong glance, the same sidelong glance we see in the Bill Lilly doll and we see in the early Barbie dolls. But Monet's Olympia was shocking because she looked directly at the viewer. She didn't modestly avert her gaze. That's a big moment in art history. And I think Malibu Barbie should be regarded as a similar big moment. The fact that the doll could look directly at the viewer and have that body, I think, was a reflection of the sexual revolution, of just how things had changed since 1959 when Barbie was originally introduced.
As the beginning of the movie tells us, before Barbie came along, the only dolls available to young girls were baby dolls. Women weren't meant to dream of being their own person. They were meant to be mothers, a cog in the system that kept pumping out men that we could send to war. To appreciate Barbie as a brand is to appreciate the reflection of a very real world that she's been a part of for so long. When something like Barbie comes along across multiple generations, mothers can look back on their own childhoods and compare and contrast to the environment they're raising their own children in. They have no choice but to ask, how is this different from my generation?
Most of the Barbies that I played with were white Barbies. And I don't know that that bothered me or that I was aware, you know, of the difference as much as Bria is now. She's extremely aware of it and prefers the dolls that look like her.
But we're supposed to be talking about the movie, right? How does the movie broach the subject of generational progress? Well, even if you were completely unfamiliar with Barbie, the doll, the brand, the movie still illustrates the concept of generational progress.
Even if you can't make it perfect, you can make it better.
The film states, flat out, that perfection will never be attainable. That even BarbieLand itself isn't perfect, but it can continuously improve with each generation. Parenthetically, it's only through direct reflection of our past actions that we can discover ways of making the next generation better. Even the criticisms of Barbie, which Sasha points out during the school scene, would not have been made possible if it weren't for the multiple generations of society reflecting on Barbie's past. The very crux of this movie's conflict comes directly from the generational progress of the real world. Greta Gerwig calls this a mother-daughter movie, and in doing so, she's referring to Ruth and Barbie as much as she's referring to Gloria and Sasha.
Any more than I could control my own daughter. I named you after her. Barbara.
She's referring to every mother and daughter who both experienced Barbie separately in their lives and then were able to bond over the common ground of recognizing the differences in their generations.
We mothers stand still so our daughters can look back to see how far they've come.
I posit that the Barbie movie is not a mother-daughter movie just because of Gloria and Sasha or just because of Ruth and Barbara, but because of the very nature of an IP that has managed to stay pertinent within society despite her multiple detractors.
It's very gratifying to think that I designed so many dolls for all these years, and I think of every child who played with the Barbie doll as my child.
We now move on to the third major theme in the Barbie movie, and what I would consider to be the villain or antagonist of the film. Expectations. As my Lord and Savior Katya Zamolotchkova once said,
expectations are just premeditated resentments. Let that sink in, it will change your life. Seriously.
People say that there is no real villain in this film, and surprise, I completely disagree. The major conflict in the Barbie movie is conflict within the self. You know, a deep, introspective concept that so many people weren't expecting from the Barbie movie that it seems that a lot of them just missed it altogether, in mistaking the movie for having no villain at all. But the true villain, shared simultaneously amongst all the characters, Ken, Barbie, Gloria, and Sasha, is not a person, but a concept. Expectations. Let's start with the relationship between Barbie and Ken. Get back in the van, I'll get you when we's gone to Wendy's. Alright, Ken has no concept of who he is without Barbie, and his expectations are that he and Barbie will fall in love and live together in the dream house happily ever after. Because he can't make Barbie fall in love with him, which he perceives to be his only real goal in life, his expectations for Barbie, and therefore himself, go unfulfilled, leaving him emotionally susceptible to the apparent perks of the real world, where he is, for the first time, recognized as a person irrespective of Barbie. You know, I'm really trying to get my Barbie pants here in the frame. Oh, Jesus Christ!
let it be known, okay, that I am definitely wearing Barbie pants. And that's gonna be it for that. Barbie, on the other hand, has her own expectations. She expects for herself to never have any complicated thoughts or feelings and to never show any negative emotion, just like the other Barbies.
I'm so embarrassed. Barbie doesn't get embarrassed.
She expects perfection out of herself, just like it's always been in the past. She expects Ken to be her unendingly supportive himbo friend without having to worry about his emotional well-being, and she suspects that he has deeper feelings for her, but she holds herself to no expectations of having to meet those deeper feelings in kind. We can view Barbie as a villain in Ken's eyes, and vice versa, which is a viewpoint that I've seen a lot of Barbie fans have, but I think to frame it in this way is to oversimplify the actual conflict that both characters feel within the self. Barbie's not evil for not being in love with Ken, she just doesn't want to hurt him. And she feels her own expectation imposed on her by Ken and the other Barbies to be in love with him, which is an expectation that she can't meet.
He is one nice looking little protein pot.
I guess.
I'd like to see what kind of nude blob he's packing under those jeans.
It's their expectations of one another and themselves that ultimately drives their conflict. Ken has the expectation of fulfilling his perfect boyfriend role, while Barbie has the expectation of being adored and self-sufficient to the point of ignoring Ken's feelings.
So does each Barbie like have their own house?
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. Where do the Kens stay?
I don't know. They don't have it figured out in Century City because we failed them.
No, you failed me!
It's not until near the end of the film, after having been exposed to Kendom and feeling what it's like to be a second-class citizen, that she realizes her expectations had been harmful to the both of them, and that she's been insensitive, and apologizes to Ken. All of Barbie's conflicts in the real world also stem from her unmet expectations. She expects that the real world will be a perfect place with no problems of inequality.
All problems of feminism and equal rights have been solved.
And she expects that the women in the real world will embrace her with open arms and unending support as a savior of sorts.
And you'll get to see all the good work we've done to fix the world. You'll be such a hero to them.
Barbie's expectations for the real world are so grandiose and unrealistic that we, the audience, can immediately predict the deep emotional turmoil she'll fall into when she realizes this isn't the case.
All those grateful, powerful women who owe their wonderful lives to Barbie.
I'll bet every woman will say thank you and give you a really big hug.
Yes, you're right.
So, of course, when Barbie gets to the real world and finds herself being ogled by men and met with angry, derisive criticisms from Sasha, the very girl that she believes she was sent here to find, she's utterly destroyed. Her concept of self, of a flawless, female empowering Barbie who did nothing but good things for the women of the world, is shattered. And even though it might seem like Sasha's the villain here, she's really not. As we've mentioned before, meaning is fluid enough that any certain thing can take on multiple meanings, sometimes even directly contradicting one another, i.e. cognitive dissonance. And Sasha is essentially the mirror that is held up to the audience in this moment. She gives voice to all those criticisms that we ourselves have probably thought at some point, all the criticisms that Barbie's been met with over the years. Having come to see Barbie in a negative light, even after having her own happy memories with Barbie, which we see multiple times in the flashback sequences of Gloria and Sasha, Sasha is simply the devil's advocate.
You've been making women feel bad about themselves since you were invented. Unrealistic physical ideals.
No.
You destroy girls' innate sense of worth.
She's voicing the negative repercussions of the expectations that she believes Barbie, the icon, puts on young girls. That she's a grinning bimbo, the face of capitalism during a bygone era where women were meant to be seen and not heard. So when she's met with the quote-unquote real Barbie, the character, who is a beacon of positivity and apparent naivete, Sasha assumes that Barbie is either A, batshit crazy, or B, trying to somehow take advantage of her, like the capitalist goon she perceives Barbie to be. Meanwhile, Ken is learning all about the men's role in the real world, shifting his expectations not only for men in general, but for what he perceives patriarchy to be.
Which, to my understanding, is where men and horses run everything.
Barbie's expectations of the real world and her role in it have been completely unmet, And even her expectations of being safe and valued in the corporate Mattel office are broken, as the higher-ups are more concerned with getting her to stop making a fuss and get back in her box rather than complete her journey of self-actualization. Even Will Ferrell and the Mattel guys have expectations for themselves, that they're empowering women and perpetuating female agency.
And when you think of Sparkle, what do you think of after that? Female agency.
But when faced directly with a woman who threatens to shake up the status quo, they instead act as a barrier to her freedom, well-intentioned though they may be. Finally, Barbie comes across the office, or rather kitchen table, of Ruth Handler, or rather her ghost. And here we come to a turning point in Barbie's journey. The realization that expectations are almost always broken in some way.
The real world isn't what I thought it was.
It never is. And isn't that marvelous?
That it's okay to have been wrong about something, and that accepting what is rather than what is expected is powerful in its own right.
You look different.
Oh, well, that's not how I normally look. I usually look perfect.
Oh, I don't know. I think you're just right.
This is where Ruth Handler, the voice of reason for both Barbie and the audience, plants the seeds that will eventually come to bloom by Gloria, America Ferrera's character, in BarbieLand, to snap the Barbies out of their brainwashing. And what's the subject of her long, epic monologue? The expectations that society puts on women.
You have to never get old, never be rude, never show off, never be selfish, never fall down, never fail, never show fear, never get out of line. It's too hard.
Expectations are the true villain of the Barbie movie. And once these expectations are broken, the characters realize how much better off they are for it. Gloria has the expectations of herself to be more like Barbie.
And then the drawings got sad and weird, and maybe because I couldn't be like you, I ended up making you like me?
To be happy and optimistic all the time, to be nothing short of the perfect mother in the hopes to rekindle her relationship with her teen daughter. In reality, it's this very guarded facade that Gloria puts up that makes Sasha pull farther away from her, because she herself doesn't have these expectations of perfection from her mother. In fact, it's only once Gloria allows this facade to crack that she realizes that her less than perfect thoughts that she was trying to hide from her daughter are actually what her daughter finds most relatable and respects most about her.
I'm the one who ruined BarbieLand with my stupid drawings in the first place.
They're not stupid, they're amazing.
You like my drawings?
They're weird and dark and crazy. Everything you pretend not to be.
I am. I'm weird and I'm dark and I'm crazy.
It's the mother's expectations for herself versus her daughter's expectations for her mother that drives their conflict. And it's the shedding of those expectations that sparks their coming back together moment.
Even if you can't make it perfect, you can make it better.
To finish off our discussion on expectations, I think Ruth Handler says it best right after she reveals to the Barbies who she truly is.
You guys, do you think the lady who invented Barbie looks like Barbie? I'm a 5'0" grandma with a double mastectomy and tax evasion issues. Nobody looks like Barbie. Except, of course, Barbie.
And through the juxtaposition of expectation versus reality, and the appreciation of the difference between the two, we're brought to our next major theme, self-acceptance/actualization, and beauty and imperfection.
Sparkle-eyed Barbie with eyes that really sparkle.
One of Barbie, the icon's, main criticisms throughout the years is that she portrays this unattainable level of perfection. And it's through Barbie, the character's journey, that we come to the realization that not only is perfection not possible, yes, even for Barbie, but it's actually not desirable. Perhaps the most impactful instance of this theme is when Barbie is sitting by herself in the park. She is quite literally a fish out of water, a beacon of manufactured perfection from a seemingly utopian reality that never changes, never deals with negative emotion, never makes a mistake. But in the real world, she's connected with the bittersweet emotions that Gloria feels, although she doesn't yet know it's Gloria, when reflecting on her tumultuous relationship with her daughter. This overwhelming sensation of both happiness and sadness brings Barbie to tears for the first time in her life, a sensation which she calls
achy. Good.
And here, for the first time, she watches real people in the real world exist around her. She hears the wind through the trees and the birds chirping. She sees a couple arguing and subsequently break up. She sees the children at play who will someday grow to be just like the adults in the park. She watches as another couple bursts into laughter, and not even knowing what they're talking about, she can't help but share in their joy. Finally, she turns to the elderly woman on the other side of the bench. Having come from a place where nobody ever ages, nobody ever gets wrinkles, nobody ever gets white hair, this woman is unlike anything that Barbie has ever seen. And because Barbie herself has never been exposed to the societal expectations of the real world, she has no concepts of ageism or sexism or contempt for the actions of previous generations. She simply sees the person in front of her as a piece of art, a portrait of a life well lived. And so she says to her,
"You're so beautiful."
And the woman, who has lived long enough to know exactly where Barbie is coming from, simply says,
"I know it."
I'm not crying, you're crying. Barbie realizes that it is indeed our ability to age and argue and make mistakes and ultimately die that is what makes us real. And once she's seen these things, she goes back to BarbieLand only to realize,
I don't really feel like Barbie anymore.
Because she isn't Barbie anymore. Barbie, the icon, the brand, isn't real. But she, the character, Margot Robbie, is. Because she's been to the real world and she's felt real emotion. Where Barbie, and by extension BarbieLand, is an idea that will go on forever, to be human is to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. To be susceptible to negative emotions, to be mortal, to sometimes be in the wrong, and to be faced with the inevitability of death. Barbie, the icon, was never meant to have a definite ending because, in Ruth Handler's own words,
Barbie was never to be anything but a reflection of what that little girl wanted her to be. In my mind, she was a prop through whom the child could visualize being an adult.
Which is why Barbie has had a ton of wedding play sets and a ton of baby care play sets.
Ah! Oh, Mitch. Gosh, I thought we discontinued her.
But she's never officially married Ken, and she's never officially had a baby. She has to be canonically unencumbered by these commitments, not only so that the child playing with her can create these narratives themselves, but because these are significant life moments that suggest Barbie experiencing the passage of time.
I'm not really sure where I belong anymore. I don't think I have an ending.
That was always the point. I created you so you wouldn't have an ending.
Additionally, Barbie can never officially age, despite having been created in the 1950s and having a ton of birthday girl playsets throughout the years.
Barbie can't get married because
Barbie can't have a baby. And the reason Barbie can't have a baby is because Barbie can't get married.
Barbie was about the period in a young woman's life, before she was weighed down by a family.
The Barbie represented a kind of rebellion. There's no mom with 3 ungrateful kids Barbie, right? Barbie is always single, she's always carefree.
If we did it as the brand keepers, they would think that she was married forever and it would take away from the open-ended play.
But beyond everything else, the Barbie movie tells us that it's okay to be a normal person. Amongst Barbie's many criticisms through the decades, one of the most prevalent is the idea that Barbie sets up unrealistic expectations, our favorite word, for the children that play with her. While the original intention of Barbie having so many careers was to inspire children to do whatever they set their mind to, one of the negative consequences is that it sets them up for a pretty tragic ego death when they inevitably discover that they can't reach Barbie's level of perfection. In other words, they can't be an astronaut and a doctor and a cowgirl all at the same time. Something I myself am still struggling to come to terms with. Feminist scholar and journalist Gloria Steinem, who has openly spoken out against Barbie throughout the years, said,
The idea that you're strengthening your daughter by saying you can be anything really ends up making her feel guilty if she can't.
But the Barbie movie directly shows us that Barbie, the icon, is simply that, an icon. She is an idealistic caricature, a fantasy that is by her very nature unobtainable. Even Barbie herself, the character, is unable to maintain such perfection as soon as she's introduced to the concepts of the real world, let alone when she actually travels to the real world.
I'm not smart enough to be interesting. Can't do brain surgery. I've never flown a plane. I'm not the president. No one on the Supreme Court is me. I'm not good enough for anything.
This emotional moment reflects the very fear that growing up playing with Barbies may have inadvertently put in a lot of us. That unless we end up being wildly successful, that our existence was somehow not worth it. The Barbie movie takes that very real and human feeling of inadequacy and shows us that we don't have to constantly strive to be exceptional or groundbreaking. We can just simply exist.
Ordinary Barbie. She's not extraordinary. She's not president of anything. Or maybe she is. Maybe she's a mom. Maybe she's not. Because it's okay to just want to be a mom, or to want to be president, or a mom who is president, or not a mom who is also not president.
This quote says, in no uncertain terms, "We are sorry that we ever made you feel like you weren't good enough." It's an acknowledgement that, yeah, not all 8 billion people in the world are going to be president or star in a movie or go to the moon. And that's okay, because being human, being ordinary, is enough. The struggle that both Ken and Barbie face is that of self-actualization, self-worth, and self-validation. While Ken's character arc is mostly focused on discovering your self-worth irrespective of your relationships or your possessions.
Okay, Ken, you have to figure out who you are without me. You're not your girlfriend. You're not your house. You're not your mink. Maybe all the things that you thought made you you aren't really you.
And by extension, the rest of the Kens must also discover their own autonomy irrespective of the Barbies, in the same way women in the real world once had to establish their own autonomy irrespective of their husbands.
But there was no word for the malaise that a woman felt, as if the world was going on without her. She's BJ's wife, Junior and Janie's mother, but who was she herself?
And through the I'm Just Ken song, which we'll discuss later, they also discover a respectful kinship, get it? With their fellow man, rather than always feeling as though they have to perform their masculinity in a never-ending cycle of one-upping each other.
Ken is me. Ken is me. Ken is me. We were only fighting because we didn't know who we were.
Meanwhile, Barbie's character arc focuses on her realization that not only does she not need to be perfect, and in fact it's our imperfections that make us real, but that validation cannot come from anywhere besides within oneself.
Do you give me permission to become human?
You don't need my permission.
So being human's not something I need to ask for or even want? I can just... It's something that I just discover I am?
It's only in embracing and accepting that we are human, and therefore imperfect and mortal and fleeting, that we allow ourselves the freedom to create meaning for ourselves and our individual lives.
A part of the people that make meaning.
And so, Ruth Handler shows Barbie exactly what it means to be human. To laugh, to cry, to feel pain, to grow old, to grieve those you've lost, and to eventually die yourself. This is the life that Barbie, the character, is potentially choosing.
Yes.
Through this acknowledgement of her own imperfection, her own mortality, Barbie discovers her sense of self and becomes Barbara.
Name? Oh, I'm Handler, Barbara.
Self-acceptance, self-actualization, and beauty and imperfection. I did that. And finally, we come to our last major theme present in the Barbie movie, gender equality.
It's a great time to be a girl. Barbie!
I'm sure many of you are surprised to see gender equality so low down the list, particularly since the very idea of a Barbie movie immediately instills within the viewer the always overused trope of girls can do anything too, a notion that was certainly radical at one time, even within Barbie's own history, but now reads as so cliched as to be anachronistic. But ironically, where so many IPs fall into the modern trap of making female characters so perfect. I'm looking at you, Rings of Power, Last Jedi, Little Mermaid 2023, where Ariel is too #girlboss to ever be saved by a filthy man, even though she'd have no concept of how to steer a naval ship in the 1800s. But the Barbie movie is not only unafraid to show the female lead being imperfect, but the concept of her coming to terms with her imperfections is a central theme of the film, as we've discussed previously. But more importantly, the movie shows us the direct negative consequences of having a sense of enthusiastic self-inflation within a marginalized group without concern for others outside of that group, even when the implication is that such self-inflation came about as a response of being marginalized.
You can't do this. This is BarbieLand. The Barbies worked hard and they dreamed hard to make it everything that it is.
The implication here being that BarbieLand was originally created out of a need for women to have autonomy in a world that did not grant them any, as a reflection of the real world and an adolescent female's perceived role in it.
At least, that's what the Barbies think.
So, while the sparkly pink girl power vibe of BarbieLand is meant to empower the Barbies, it ends up having the opposite effect on the Kens.
I think I owe you an apology.
Huh?
Not every night had to be girls' night.
The umbrella term for this overarching theme of equality has been frequently summed up as patriarchy is harmful to everyone, which is true, but it just barely scratches the surface. In reality, I think the message is a little bit more complicated than that. First of all, the discrimination that we see against the Kens in BarbieLand isn't openly malicious, and that's an extremely important aspect to keep in mind. Think about the real world for a second. And not the fantastical America Ferrera, Will Ferrell version of the real world, but the real world in real life. Sure, there are a few Elliot Rodger incels out there who just flat out can't stand women due to whatever archaic ideology they subscribe to, but for the most part, men in the real world don't consciously make the decision to disrespect women. Side note, I should mention that I am talking specifically about the behaviors among the Western world, meaning primarily North and South America, Australia, New Zealand, and Europe. This is an important distinction to make because there certainly are places and cultures in the world where women do not have equal rights to men, or even anything resembling equal rights. This certainly doesn't mean that everyone from a non-Western country are inherently anti-women, nor that an individual in such a location can't disagree with any number of negative social constructs imposed upon them by their culture. I'm not openly casting judgment on other cultures, many of which have socioeconomic and historical intricacies that I am wildly unqualified to speak on and wouldn't even attempt to do so. I'm simply saying that they aren't quite as relevant to the Barbie movie, which is an artifact of Western society. Everybody got that? Great. Gender is a social construct that is based on behavior, culture, and preference, rather than biology or anything else. Remember how we talked about how there is no inherent meaning in anything besides what us humans give it? Well, gender's a lot like that. Because it's something us humans made up, it's something we humans can decide and redecide and redecide the definition of as many times as we want. Humans are malleable creatures, prone to being influenced by the thoughts and attitudes of the people around us, even when we don't realize it's happening. Gender discrimination is a 100% learned behavior.
You be the pesky brother! You running around, you pulling the little girl's pigtails.
On it. Sorry, I don't even want to do this. It's my job. I'm making it fun.
Mainstream society teaches us from a very early age that there is this undeniable law called gender, which states that there are people with penises called boys and people with vaginas called girls, and these two groups of people are treated differently. Girls like pink tea parties, and boys like blue monster trucks. This undeniable law is immediately disproven the second a child with a penis decides they want to go to a pink tea party, or when someone is born with both a penis and a vagina, or with secondary sex characteristics of both. And so, men who genuinely have nothing but good intentions towards women can still end up discriminating against them in ways they don't mean to, and vice versa. This facet of human behavior is reflected in BarbieLand with how the Barbies treat the Kens.
Everything's almost like reversed here.
The Barbies are not directly cruel to the Kens, they just don't necessarily go out of their way to ask the Kens to contribute in any impactful way, because that's not what Ken does. Ken is still present during the important press conferences in BarbieLand, he's just not the main focus. Ken is an accessory for Barbie, in the same way that women were once accessories to their husbands and children.
The Ken was almost peripheral. He really was a gnat, a fly, an accessory.
She met Ken. Ken was sort of a palpable idiot. I mean, Ken, at best, was a fashion accessory. If Barbie was in the glamour outfit, you wanted a Ken next to her in the tuxedo. But, I mean, all our Kens talked in voices like this. I mean, Ken was a little slow.
Don't tell him, but I never got a Ken.
That's because Ken is totally superfluous.
I didn't say that.
They're just products of their environment. And the same is true with the Barbies in BarbieLand. They're hypocritical in finding fault with Ken's behavior, even though they themselves are displaying the same behavior.
Stop it, Ken.
Y'all were just screaming at the top of your lungs on this public-ass beach, but as soon as Ken joins in, you're like, grow up! Like, what? But that's an accurate depiction of how groups really can be hypocritical of each other in real life. Like, how many times have you been talking to a gal pal and she's like, men are such assholes who don't want anything but casual sex. But then the next weekend she's like, I'm gonna find me a hottie on Tinder to me down and get the hell out of my apartment. It's okay to have both feelings. All human beings have contradictory, complex feelings sometimes. There's no reason to bring gender into it.
I'm the son of a mother. I'm the mother of a son. I'm the nephew of a woman aunt.
And even after Ken returns from the real world and introduces patriarchy to BarbieLand and the Kens take over, they're not shown being overtly mean to the Barbies. They're just not exactly treating them as equals either. They're exercising a way of expressing their thoughts and attitudes and expressing their autonomy in a way that was previously not available to them. And in doing so, they're placing themselves on a hierarchy above the Barbies. To an outsider looking in, this may appear to be done maliciously, but it's really not. It's just the Kens taking back their own voice, the same way Barbie, the icon, and therefore BarbieLand, allowed women to do starting in the 1950s.
This is my Mojo Dojo Casa House. It's not Barbie's Mojo Dojo Casa House. Right? How's that feel? It is not fun, is it?
And this is where the film poses the great philosophical question that underlines its theme of gender equality. Are we just meant to go on like this forever? Where one group, the Barbies, have to wrestle away all the power from the Kens, and then the Kens retaliate by taking the power away from the Barbies, and on forever and ever? Well, no. The answer lies not within BarbieLand, not within the real world, but somewhere in between. A theoretical future that it's up to all of us, the audience, to create, where an individual's merit is determined by their actions, attitudes, and credentials rather than their gender.
MBAs, medical degrees, and I don't know, swim lessons. I could have ruled that world, but I don't need any of those things here.
To do anything else is to be harmful to everyone and inherently pit them against each other.
Here, I'm just a dude. And you know what? That's enough.
The true answer is to do away with gender discrimination of any form, to take gender completely out of the equation and focus solely on who the person is as a person.
I don't think that things should go back to the way that they were. No Barbie or Ken should be living in the shadows.
Or Allan.
And that's not necessarily to say that we have to do away with the concept of gender altogether, but rather that we have to keep it from impacting the judgments that we make on others. Which brings us to soundtrack, costumes, and set design.
Girls just know it's cool. Girls like butterfly art Barbie.
So as I've said before, I'm not going to go too in-depth with this section. One, because this video is long enough and only getting longer. But two, because pretty much everyone who has seen this movie can agree that these three facets of the film are solid, even if they hated the rest of the movie for whatever reason. As someone who has been fascinated with dolls and antique toys as historical artifacts since I was about 11, I truly appreciate the care and attention that the filmmakers took in referencing actual outfits and playsets throughout Barbie's history. There are tons of articles online and videos from other content creators that list out all the references in the Barbie movie, but my personal favorite comes from Joey at Beauty Inside a Box, whose videos I have unironically watched at least 3 times each, and whom I absolutely adore. Hey girl. Click on the link in the description or type in the title you see on the screen to check out that video. Joey's also done unboxing videos of some of the discontinued dolls from the movie, so I really can't recommend them enough, including this one line that made me laugh so hard it woke my husband up.
This is probably how my friends want me to react when they tell me they're pregnant, but really I'm just like, oh, okay, that's cool. Guess I'll never see you again. Kidding, kidding.
We're into Barbie! Each sold separately, you put car together.
So we know the costume department people were absolutely killing it, just killing it, with bringing Barbie's iconic outfits to life. But there are several much more subtle uses of costume design that help tell the story to those who are paying attention. Examples. When Barbie comes back to the dream house after the Barbies have tricked the Kens, she's wearing yellow. In fact, the only time since returning from the real world that she wears purely pink is when she's in the undercover jumpsuit with the other Barbies. In other words, once she's been to the real world, she no longer feels like Barbie, so she doesn't wear pink. The pink Birkenstocks as a symbol of her journey coming to a healthy blend of reality versus BarbieLand, and ultimately finding a balance of realism and whimsy. Everyone in the real world are wearing muted colors to directly contrast to the bright pastels of BarbieLand. In the real world, the color pink is only used when it either directly relates to Barbie, such as with the CEO with the pink tie or Gloria wearing pink shoes to work at Mattel, or to relate to the characters we are meant to sympathize with. The flashback scenes where Gloria and Sasha are wearing pink shoes and Gloria's in a pink jacket. Think of the park scene where a little girl is seen wearing a pink jacket and another little girl is wearing a pink bike helmet. Think of the old lady's pink sparkly headband in contrast to the rest of her pretty boring outfit. Think of Ruth Handler sitting at her kitchen table with the pink gingham print. Did you notice that it's the same print as Barbie's dress? Finally, think of Sasha at the very end of the movie when they're dropping Barbie off, wearing a pink tank top, signifying that she has allowed Barbie to have a positive impact on her after all.
Color your world pink, Barbie girl.
We've already talked about the Soundstage Musical-esque backdrops being used to cue the audience in on the fantastical nature of the real world in tandem with BarbieLand, but it's worth mentioning that the perfectly ordinary and uninspired designs of the set in the real world contrast the imaginative designs in the environments in BarbieLand. There was literally a worldwide shortage of pink paint during the making of this film, because they were so determined to make this world pop with Barbie's signature color. They also did an incredible job realizing the functionality of these set pieces as toys. None of the dream houses have walls, for example, because you have to be able to reach in and play with them. The Barbie ambulance folds out into a doctor's office, just like all the Barbie vehicle playsets where the practicality of the child being able to imagine the inside of the car is more important than it having the realistic functions of a car. Notice the static, unmoving, eerie nature of the environment in BarbieLand. There's no wind, none of the leaves in the trees are moving, there are no birds chirping, no nature noises, and this is all to contrast the very living nature of the real world when we later get to the park scene. The only quote-unquote wildlife we see are 2 seagulls that are so obviously set pieces that they just float in the sky indefinitely, barely moving. In fact, the only other animals we see are the dolphins and deer in the travel montage, which are obviously painted set pieces. Did you notice the perfect hair and perfect nails at the salon? Best store ever! Yay, every day! How about the milkshakes at the ice cream place, all setting out on the counter because they'll never melt and they'll always look perfect? Everybody's sipping drinks with no liquid in them. Think about the disco scene where they somehow managed to hang streamers from the sky? I would also be remiss if I didn't mention that Neil deGrasse Tyson himself has confirmed BarbieLand's location to be, quote, somewhere in the Florida Keys. That has nothing to do with anything, I just really want everyone to know that he tweeted that.
When you press her back, she winks. New Western Barbie doll.
Yeehaw.
I'm DJ Barbie, here on BARB Radio.
Because we're living in an era where it's easier than ever to make a movie, a lot of filmmakers underestimate the importance of a great soundtrack. A great soundtrack will consist not only of original songs created specifically for the film, but also of pre-existing songs used in clever ways to provide character development and subtext. The soundtrack to the Barbie movie is fantastic because of its ability to add subtext and character development to those who are paying attention to the lyrics, and the ability to set the mood and supplement the flow of the story for those listening more casually or focusing on other aspects of the movie. What's particularly interesting about the soundtrack to the Barbie movie is that it was essentially reverse engineered, meaning that the most important songs were created by the songwriters after they had already watched a selection of the film. Then, once the songwriters had created those songs, the composers subsequently based the score off of those completed songs. For example, the Dua Lipa song near the beginning of the movie was composed musically so that the dance captains could choreograph to it, but the lyrics weren't written yet. Dua Lipa then created the song's lyrics based on what she was seeing the actors perform. Then, having seen how impactful that completed song was, they decided to make a marching band fanfare version of the same song play whenever Will Ferrell and the Mattel guys showed up.
Miss Barbie?
Thanks for the ride. This has been so much fun.
What makes it so impactful is its ability to be so catchy and fun and upbeat, but deceptively melancholy when you actually pay attention to the lyrics. Greta Gerwig says, quote, "Dua Lipa makes kind of modern tragic disco hits. She has that ability to write a disco song that's so much fun, but when you actually listen to it, you're like, she's sad." We'll talk about those lyrics in just a second. Another example is the song What Was I Made For, which plays during the finale. Greta Gerwig and editor Nick Hoy literally gave Billie Eilish and Phineas O'Connell 30 minutes of footage of the film in the hopes that they would create a song that, quote, expresses what's in Barbie's heart, unquote. And less than a week later, they did just that. As Greta Gerwig says, quote, "I couldn't believe that she wrote these lyrics after seeing the footage, mirroring what's on screen but also deepening it. It's a song that is the story of Barbie, but it's also the story of all of us," end quote. The songs are all unique and catchy in their own right, and they span a wide variety of genres, and it's clear that everyone involved put genuine care and meticulous detail into the end product. But what I want to focus on here are the lyrics that are easy to overlook, but actually act as pivotal forms of storytelling. These songs may seem just silly and fun at first glance, but like so many other things in the Barbie movie, they have a much deeper meaning if you take the time to really listen. So, song by song, here are some lyrics that bring the true message of the Barbie movie to life, and how they relate to the themes that we've discussed previously. Dance the night away, my heart will be burning, but you won't see it on my face. Watch me dance, dance the night. As Greta Gerwig mentioned, the lyrics tell a very different story than the upbeat music would lead you to believe. The phrase, "Oh, my outfit's so tight you can see my heartbeat tonight," highlights the fixation of her body image. It's what she's most known for, her body and her clothes. My heart could be burning, but you won't see it on my face. Barbie can never be anything less than perfect, regardless of how she feels on the inside. I'll still keep the party running, not one hair out of place. She gives us a perfect smile no matter what, because her appearance is everything to her. She holds herself to the expectation that she can never be anything less than perfect. Lately I've been moving close to the edge, still be looking my best. I stay on the beat, you can count on me, I ain't missing no steps. Here we see that Barbie feels as though she's reaching her breaking point, but doesn't feel as though she can express it. She has the eyes of too many people on her, too many people that she's afraid of letting down, so she keeps it all to herself. When my heart breaks, they never see it. When my world shakes, I feel alive. I don't play it safe. This suggests that she actually enjoys the adrenaline rush that she gets from putting herself in emotional turmoil, that maybe she even perpetuates her own suffering to some extent. This is especially poignant because many self-destructive qualities are so hard to quit because we do get something out of them.
People don't do things in a pattern without a payoff. She gets people to talk to her. She feels like the center of attention. She feels like she's the queen for the day.
She's lived like this for so long that this is the only way she knows how to exist. Even when the tears are flowing like diamonds on my face, I'll still keep the party going, not one hair out of place. There is no rest for the weary. There is no room for negative feelings when you perceive yourself to be infallible to others.
And the less I seek my source from some definitive, closer I am to find. Closer I am to find.
So this song was obviously around way before the Barbie movie, but Gerwig's choice to use this song in particular is very deliberate. Think back on when we talked about existential nihilism. That tastes like a full fucking ring pop. Like someone took a ring pop, melted it down. Well, it says no sugar either, so this is just made of cancer. Think back on how we talked about existential nihilism and how each individual's life has to take on its own purpose and meaning, which that individual must be the one to discover. There's more to one answer to these questions pointing me in a crooked line, and the less I seek my source from some definitive, closer I am to find. Literally, the message here is that there is no one correct answer. There are as many unique answers to the question, what is the meaning of life, as there are people to ask. And this is foreshadowing to the very conflict that leads Barbie to realizing she doesn't want to be Barbie anymore. She doesn't know what her ending will be. There is no definitive answer. The sooner she eventually realizes that it's up to her to create the meaning of her life, the closer she is to being her true self. And I went to see the doctor of philosophy, with a poster of Rasputin and a beard down to his knee. He never did marry or see a B-grade movie. He graded my performance, he said he could see through me. I spent 4 years prostate to the higher mind, got my paper, and I was free. And here's where we previously mentioned the parallel of Will Ferrell's character, as well as the Wizard of Oz. The protagonist of the song has put her trust in someone she perceives to have all the answers, but when she finally finds them to ask for their help, she finds that there is no definitive answer. Man, I am. That's just the man I am. Super sleazy, sexy. Once again, a seemingly goofy song holds some little hidden gems of subtext. Barbie, your time is up. You will not take our voice. This is an important line because it directly shows how oppressed the Kens have felt. It's not just that they want to drink brewski beers and decorate with horses and mini fridges. It's that up until this point, they ultimately haven't felt as though their autonomy was being respected. It's yet another hint that BarbieLand is not the ideal reality after all. And all the papers say that there's no Ken without Barbie, but baby, there's no woman who could possibly stop me. This is the sort of self-motivation we hear all the time from women, saying they don't need no man and they're unstoppable. But in this case, the message is coming from men. Well, little plastic men. It shows us that the feeling of inferiority that comes from being an oppressed minority is a human feeling, not based on gender. In other words, it shows that men would feel the same way as women feel if they were oppressed as much as women have been historically. It's time you realize that in this world, we've all been taught a lie. You think that women rule the world, but baby, where I've been, all the things I've seen, this Ken has crossed the borderline. This is the sort of rallying cry I imagine happening all the time back in the 1950s and 60s, when career women who had broken through the glass ceiling were trying to convince their other female friends that they could do the same. From Barbie's point of view, it seems almost villainous that Ken has taken over. But if you step back and look at the full picture, you'll see that it's actually the Kens that should be proud of breaking out of their proverbial chains.
Give us a smile, Blondie!
Hey, Blondie. From Ken's point of view.
Hey Blondie, there's a million eyes on you, do you ever get curious? Hey Blondie.
This song is only in the movie for a few moments, so I won't go too into detail with it because this video is long enough. But it's worth mentioning that the lyrics to this one seem to perfectly illustrate the frustration that Ken feels at trying to get Barbie to notice him, as well as the pressure Barbie feels at having so many people look up to her. Hey Blondie, could you maybe just slide towards me? Don't want anything serious. Hey Blondie, could you maybe just cry for me if we ever get serious? Hey Blondie, I took 1,000,000 tries for you and I want to take 1,000,000 more. Hey Blondie, if you ever get tired of me, just remember what I'm really here for. Those twists and turns that feel like cursive but you don't crumble. You might miss one step and you still don't stumble.
And I just wonder, do you ever get weak like
Monday morning, baby girl, do you ever to Do you ever get tired of the ropes and wires, baby girl? There's a million eyes on you. There's a million eyes on you. I'm just Ken.
I'm just Ken, and I'm enough, and I'm great.
the one that we all keep coming back to. The song that we can't stop singing, the song that ultimately brings the Kens to the realization that fighting amongst themselves isn't the answer. As catchy as the music is, and as fun as the visuals are, I've seen a lot of mixed feelings about it, even amongst two of my most favorite people in the entire world.
This 9.5-minute Ken number.
Mama. But then it turned into the Twyla Tharp, Lucinda Childs, like Busby
I didn't
Berkeley.
like that either.
You didn't!
At all.
Oh, ouch. You didn't like that?
At all.
Oh, I lived for that. When it became like
When it
wide
became
charts
Grease?
and formations.
No.
You didn't?
Not at all.
Okay.
And sure, this particular song may not be everyone's cup of tea, but I think at the very least, it's important to understand the reasoning behind it, especially within the context of the Soundstage musical that the film, and this scene in particular, is based off of. When people say that they don't like musicals because they can't get past the fact that people randomly burst into song and dance, that's a valid criticism.
Oh, I hate musicals. I hate it.
You hate musicals.
There I go. I'm walking over the side of the stage to get some baguette. Oh, God, just say it. Just say it.
Musical theater is a medium that doesn't translate to everybody because not everybody can suspend their disbelief in that way. But if you begin to look at musical theater as its own unique language in and of itself, rather than comparing it to the more realistic forms of storytelling, the reasoning behind the song and dance numbers become at least a little bit clearer. There's a classic proverb amongst musical theater folks. When the emotion becomes too strong for speech, you sing. When it becomes too strong for song, you dance. So, when characters in a musical begin to sing, it's not because singing is a realistic option for a normal human being to do in that situation. It's because, within the language of musical theater, song is inherently a stronger, more intense show of emotion than regular speech. And when even singing isn't enough to convey the emotion, the entire body is taken over to convey the emotion through dance. If the characters had already been bursting into song the entire movie, the Ken song wouldn't seem so out of place. But because this scene is so unlike any that came before it, those that aren't familiar with musical theater might find themselves confused. When a body of work, whether it be film or a stage musical, uses a moment of dance without dialogue to convey symbolism, foreshadowing, or psychological subtext, it's referred to as a dream ballet. And if you can't find your young daughter on Christmas morning and it causes you to break into dance, it's known as a dream ballet Ramsey. Don't use that. Anywho, although I'm Just Ken technically qualifies more as a dance break than a true dream ballet, being that it's sandwiched between lyrics, the intention and overall effect are the same. This scene is so integral to the Kens' character arc, as it begins with the Kens fighting amongst themselves, cultivates to a silent dance break where we see their feud come to a final confrontation, and then ultimately breaking out of their proverbial barriers, setting aside their differences to help pick one another up, and joining hands in solidarity. To quote the Los Angeles Times article by Ashley Lee, where she also describes this scene as a dream ballet, the song is an empathetic acknowledgement of the pressures put on men to literally perform their masculinity, often to toxic lengths. After urgently spinning in symmetrical formations to full-on 80s synth pop, Gosling's Ken is revealed anew. He again sings the chorus, but this time he's standing tall, staring directly into the camera with a knowing smile. He helps his fellow Kens up from the floor and giggles after they kiss him on the cheek in gratitude. He is no longer threatened by other men or the expression of affection among them.
I'm a liberated man. I know crying's not weak.
Okay. So, to all of us looking at the movie as though it's just a normal movie and not a piece of musical theater, this moment of diverting completely away from the other characters and plot seems unusual and even superfluous. But if you allow yourself to look deeper into the intention of the scene and the medium which it has chosen to convey these intentions, the true nature becomes clear. It's not just a catchy tune we all find ourselves humming while we're doing the dishes. I'm speaking from experience here. It is a seamless blending of music, color, choreography, and humor that communicates its message of shedding harmful societal ideologies in a way unlike anything modern audiences have likely ever seen before.
Don't worry, you're safe here.
What is this place?
I always find I think best at kitchen tables.
Here we go. The song that gives me goosebumps every single time I hear it. Keep in mind, the full song in its entirety perfectly illustrates not only the overall message of the Barbie movie, but, as Greta Gerwig said, how the character of Barbie feels within the story. And I say this because even though I'm only going to be talking about the 2 stanzas of the song that are actually used in the film, the entire song is most certainly worth checking out if you haven't already. Without further ado, let's talk about the lyrics used in the film. I used to float, now I just fall down. Within the context of the movie, we've seen that Barbie used to just float dreamily down from her dream house, but now that she's been tainted by the feelings of the real world, she falls to the ground. To extrapolate this concept further into real life, who amongst us hasn't felt as though their once idealistic view of the world from childhood left them bruised and battered in reality? I used to know, but I'm not sure now. Where we once had a seemingly endless world of possibilities as to who we would become, who amongst us hasn't been disappointed in at least some aspect of how they turned out? How many of us had a very clear goal in mind for ourselves during adolescence, but eventually grew to realize this goal was either unattainable or no longer what we truly wanted? What was I made for? What was I made for? That ever-pressing existential question. Why am I here? Why are any of us here? What's the point to all of this? 'Cause I don't know how to feel. At this point in the story, Barbie is not only overwhelmed by the new real-world emotions that she's previously never felt before, but has also returned to her old world long enough to realize that she no longer feels as though she belongs there. But I want to try. As she speaks to Ruth, her creator, her mother, she vocalizes her desire to, quote, do the imagining, not be the idea. The goal of her journey has shifted from finding the ultimate answer to simply allowing herself to look for it. I don't know how to feel. She quite literally doesn't know what to do with these new feelings. Just like we in the real world are so frequently overwhelmed with conflicting waves of joy and sorrow, of fear and exhilaration, of love and loss that we're flooded with in our day-to-day lives. But someday I might. And finally, with this line, she realizes that she doesn't need to know what to do with these feelings. She simply has to strive for the future, and that she will eventually grow to be wiser than she is now. Someday, I might. And with that word, might, is the understanding that she may never know exactly what to do to cope with all of these feelings. But it's the very act of living, of trying to make sense of her emotions in the world around her, that make her, and make all of us, human. And as she watches the memories of generations of women who came before her, women Barbie herself perhaps inspired, living through life's great milestones, growing and becoming capable of manifesting their own destiny, and ultimately cultivating in the common ending we all must eventually share, the end of a life, with the next generation gathering flowers for their grave as the cycle continues, Barbie makes her decision.
Yes.
Fuck me, dude. Alright, real quick, take me home.
Just take me home, take me home.
Just like with the previous song, the full lyrics in their entirety perfectly voice the journey of self-actualization that Barbie has gone through. I never thought that I could be the one to open my eyes. I know that I may never know the future, unpredictable. 100 choices led me here, lessons learned with every tear. I know that we'll be looking back one day, but I trust that I could never stay the same. It's just a really great feel-good song that wraps the whole Barbie movie up with a bow, and you should give it a listen. Just gotta shout out this awesome Barbie hat that I got from Bored Bunny. She's fabulous. She also made Sorry for How I Drive while I'm listening to Ryan Gosling perform Push by Matchbox 20 as featured in the 2023 cultural phenomenon and box office success Barbie. That is just so uber specific and also completely accurate to my day-to-day life. Bored Bunny, not sponsored. Hey girl, what's up? I've gathered a few videos from other content creators that I think mention a lot of the criticisms that I frequently see come up, so let's go through some of them now.
If women were in positions of power, everything would be better. And it's like a shit ton of people in our government are women. How's that all working out?
So, like, yeah, at this point, she talks about how the military-industrial complex is run by women, and she says, how's that working out? As though she's made some great point here. But the whole point of the movie is that gender should be irrelevant and that everyone should have a voice. Wow, it's almost like people can be garbage and problematic regardless of their gender. You know, like the point of the whole fucking movie.
Ken reads all of this feminist literature, which tells him that men are in charge of everything and rule everything and can get away with anything. And the movie itself never really goes into anything else about patriarchy, so I guess that's what patriarchy is.
Once again, she doesn't understand that the movie's choice to keep the definition of patriarchy as vague as possible is done intentionally. Not only that, but the movie does fucking address this point by having Ken make a comical assumption of what patriarchy is, and by Ruth Handler saying at the end that humans make things up like Barbie and patriarchy just to deal with how uncomfortable being human is.
The Barbies in Ken's new established patriarchy seem much happier than before. They're having fun drinking beers with the Kens, talking to the Kens about things like technology and sports and movies.
Okay, but they're not having fun and drinking beers with the Kens. They're rubbing the Kens' feet and bringing them beers. They're not engaged in conversation with the Kens about anything. They're being spoken at by the Kens.
Like, if they wanted to show the patriarchy being bad or oppressive, they should have, like, a scene where one of the Kens slaps one of the Barbies' asses and the Barbie's like, ew.
Except, why would they do that? Because they have no genitals or concept of sexuality, so there would be no reason to slap her ass. The entire point of this part of the film is to show how demoralizing it is for the Barbies to be treated the way the Kens were treated previously. So why on earth would you try to argue that the Barbies are actually happier this way and Ken made it better? What? Girl, you're making shit up. You are making shit up on this day.
What the fuck is going on in here on this day?
The reason that this is a turning point for Barbie as a character is because she, for the first time, understands what it's like to be less than. So for you to say for a second that that's not what's happening here is insane. Ken himself even says it. He says, how's that feel? It is not fun, is it? Bitches be stupid. Sorry.
Yes, that's right. The Barbies weren't having fun with their Kens. They were brainwashed by the patriarchy.
Why is she playing this off as though it's a joke? That's literally, unironically, what happens in the movie. She's over here trying to pretend like the Barbies were having an amazing time when they were objectively not acting of their own free will. Well, I will. Well, I will.
Everything still revolved around the Barbies.
Objectively untrue. A ton of the Ken's insecurities come from other Kens.
I made a double bet with Ken, and you can't make me look uncool in front of Ken.
Ken's not cool!
He is to me.
Now that they think they have power over you, you make them question whether they have enough power over each other.
Showing that the way that one is perceived by their peers plays an enormous role in determining your self-worth.
You can't do a flip like that, Ken.
What? Without it, I'm just another blonde guy who can't do flips.
And a ton of the scenes revolve around the Kens actively ignoring the Barbies or talking over them or interrupting them, which is not the same thing as whatever himbo shit you're talking about. And the quote-unquote nice things you claim they're doing for the Barbies are all completely self-serving.
Playing music for them. They're playing the guitar and drums for them.
This ain't over, not well, I still need you around. I wanna push you around, well I will, I wanna push you down, well I will.
They use the Kens' love and devotion and loyalty against them, and trick the Kens into thinking they are cheating on them with other Kens.
Love, devotion, and loyalty? I don't know who this girl is, but I'm genuinely concerned for her if she can't understand the dangers of obsessive and self-serving behavior thinly masked underneath a smile and telling a woman she has a beautiful face.
Gee, I am so awkward and don't feel pretty at all, and will anyone ever like me?
Or distract them with the old standby, wearing glasses so that they can discover that you're pretty.
Yeah?
Sure, go ahead.
There. Now we can see your beautiful face.
Everyone
appears to be happy on first glance, and therefore nothing about this situation is problematic. There's no way my friend is in an abusive relationship because look how happy they are on Facebook.
She keeps using these examples as though the Barbies were happy being subservient, but she is utterly missing the entire point of the film, that self-worth can only come from oneself, irrespective of their romantic partner or material possessions. And that we have to do away with treating people differently altogether when it comes to gender, rather than having an extreme one way or the other. We aren't supposed to look at the Barbies or the Kens as the pinnacle of morality here. We're supposed to look at them as part of the problem. The entire point is that we as a viewer are meant to want to find a healthy medium between the two. Stop sucking Ken's
nude blood
just so you can purposefully misunderstand the point of the film.
With the ending of the movie, where Barbie rejects her capitalist utopia created by Mattel, visits a gynecologist, and embraces nature. Nah, it really ain't that deep. It was just kind of a silly little movie.
Except, yeah, it really is that deep. And the fact that you're unwilling to look past your preconceived notions does not make it less so. The silliness of a movie has nothing to do with how much hidden nuance is buried beneath the surface, and you seem to have fallen into the trap of mistaking its campy straightforwardness with simplicity.
And honestly, every scene the little girl and the mom was in just fucking sucked. Like, it just became a different movie every single time they were on screen, and that movie sucked.
Alright, well yeah, I'll give her that one, that was funny.
What was funny was people were actually dunking on Ben for bringing a notebook to the movie theater so he could write notes while he was watching Barbie, but like, I did that too.
Oh, you brought a little notebook into the theater with you? That's cute. And I'm not saying she's stupid or anything. Bitches be stupid. I mean, I watched the whole review, and I do think there are things that she says that I agree with.
It was a fun movie. I liked it. It was a nice change from the non-stop Disney remakes and Marvel movies.
I just think that, like, some of what she said is, dumb.
Clearly, the movie is saying that patriarchy is good, because if it was trying to say anything else, it failed.
Barbie has the coolest stuff, definitely.
This one can be summed up as, I'm determined to not enjoy this movie because of the current state of Hollywood and capitalism surrounding it.
I think I would have loved Barbie if it was 2005, but it just isn't.
She does a great job explaining some very real issues that are happening with the strikes and shit, but pushing that rhetoric onto the film itself as a piece of art is not only unfair, but an insult to the creative minds that made it what it is.
Personally, I just don't feel like having fun with Barbie.
Okay, well, that's not how you judge a film. I don't want to like this and therefore I won't. Like, what?
Not at a time when the corporate franchise is the only choice I have when I go to the movies.
It's not the only choice you have when you go to the movies. There are tons of movies that come out that no one sees. Go to literally any foreign movie with subtitles playing in a theater and I guarantee you'll have the theater to yourself. I know from experience. The fact that you would say that this is your only option when you go to the movies leads me to believe you don't surround yourself in a lot of movies. And the only reason I know that not to be the case is because I've seen your channel previously. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt and assume that you were being hyperbolic with that statement, but like, no.
I want my movies to expand my visual palette and to change and challenge how I see the world, or put me in touch with my emotions, without some sort of ulterior motive. I can want that without being a pick-me, or Ben Shapiro, or a contrarian.
That's fine, but don't expect your opinion of the film to be taken seriously amongst other film critics if your main criticisms with the movie are the Hollywood strikes and late-stage capitalism. If you can't look at a film objectively as a film, then why are you reviewing it as a film critic? Full stop. That's like going to see The Whale and being like, my dad was overweight when he died and I don't like this movie. Like, judge a film based on its merits, girl. There is substance to be found if you allow yourself to look beyond the immediate cheesy appearance and corporate greed. If you really can't differentiate between the social circumstances under which a film was made and the film itself, then wait until things settle down a bit and give it another watch with a little bit more of an open mind. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at how substantive this film really is.
Something special. I just went and watched the Barbie movie, and it is probably the wokest film of 2023.
Really just another indoctrination vehicle.
Okay, I had like 4 other videos that I was gonna go through here, but I think I'm just gonna stop it here because I think I'll just be rehashing a bunch of stuff we've already talked about, and frankly, listening to all of these people screaming into their microphones about how woke and capitalist this shit is not only tiring, but at this point, tired. Finally, I want to go over a few of the points in the movie that I would consider flaws, because even though I think it's a great movie and it exceeded my expectations, it's not perfect. We've all seen the iconic America Ferrera speech scene at this point, where she snaps the Barbies out of their brainwashing by outlining the contradictory nature of the expectations society puts on women, and unsurprisingly, people have pretty mixed feelings about it. Some people think it's flawless and should be entered in its own separate entry in the Library of Congress. Some people think it's anti-male woke propaganda. Some people think it's pretty good, but maybe a little preachy. I think it's a very succinct and, for the most part, objective recap of some of the common struggles that women go through, but I do think it goes on a little too long. The speech is powerful and rallying without feeling as though it's particularly preachy, until it does. It's like, empowerment, empowerment, empowerment! And then right when you think it's reached its peak, it keeps going. And you're like, okay, girl, come on now. The everything is your fault line is the only line I can genuinely say that I didn't like, because in my opinion, it changes the vibe of the speech from, here's the exact reasons why women are frustrated, to, we are martyrs who get blamed for everything. Which is just objectively untrue because we don't have enough power to have been blamed for everything. So yes, while the speech overall was very powerful, I think just a few edits could have made it more so.
Where's the Barbie?
This one is sort of a criticism for the future, especially since Mattel has already greenlit an absurd number of movies for their IPs. Like, we are unironically getting an Uno movie and a Magic 8 Ball movie at some point. Will the Magic 8 Ball movie not suck? Don't count on it, though! And maybe I'm being too skeptical. Maybe Mattel will hire only the most god-tier directors and screenwriters for each of these properties. Maybe each of them will be multifaceted cinematic masterpieces that can be dissected and analyzed with the same level of detail as Barbie. Maybe Daniel Day-Lewis himself will play the Magic 8 Ball.
I drink your milkshake.
But I seriously doubt it. These companies are going to take the slightest amount of success and run with it, which means we're almost certainly going to get a Barbie sequel at some point too, even though the story is perfect as its own standalone narrative. This is a sad reality that I've already come to terms with, because companies are in it to make money. And unless they get Greta Gerwig herself to write and direct the sequel, and give her as much time as she needs to do so, it'll probably end up sucking.
But Carly, didn't you just criticize Broe Deschanel for talking about how much of a corporate sellout the Barbie movie is? Yes, but her argument is, or at least appears to be, that a movie from a pre-existing IP is inherently going to be a shitty movie and isn't worth watching if for no other reason than it's making money for a company that's already hugely successful, and we shouldn't give them any more money.
If we're past being critical of corporations trying to sell us stuff through art, then we may as well give up.
Her qualms with the Barbie movie are largely based on the real-world circumstances surrounding the creation of the film, rather than the contents of the film itself.
So things are very, very, very bad right now for the film industry, potentially the worst they've ever been. The film was fine. Its structural and thematic shortcomings are not what sent me into a depressive spiral when I left the theater.
And in doing so, it appears that she's preemptively made a judgment about the film without having enough of an open mind to fully allow herself to digest it. We all went into the Barbie movie expecting it to be a cheesy cash grab with no real substance, just like the Mario movie, as I mentioned in the timestamp currently on your screen, but it ended up being so much more than that.
To be able to identify when you're being manipulated as a viewer is a tenet of media literacy, and I don't think we should ever throw that away just because someone you like made the propaganda.
The propaganda she's referring to here being the message that needless consumerism can't bring one happiness, and that imperfection should be both accepted and expected, even amongst those we put on a pedestal. The great irony of the Barbie movie is that it uses an icon associated so heavily with capitalism to show that attaining material possessions and status can't actually bring happiness. Media literacy is all well and good, but you don't get to call something propaganda just because someone other than the creative minds behind the work decided to market the hell out of it. If the work itself ends up being non-substantive bullshit, then by all means, read it to filth. But don't be mad at something that's genuinely well done just because you're mad at everybody else who stopped caring. The point I'm making here is not only that we should judge a film as a film, regardless of who made it, but also that we shouldn't rope Barbie in with all the other eventual movies that perhaps won't have as much effort put into them. If the Magic 8 Ball and Uno movies end up being postmodern masterpieces about the intricacies of gambling addiction and the illusion of free will, then I will gladly give them all the credit that they are due. But if that turns out to not be the case, and a ton of other IP movies come out that don't put in the same amount of effort that Barbie clearly has, then we need to make a conscious effort to not lump it in with those eventual stinkers.
So there we have it. I've walked you through the philosophical schools of thought that are present in this film. I've outlined the entirety of the most important subtextual themes, and I've given exact examples for each of my arguments, complete with the societal and historical context of not only the Barbie brand, but of the traditional conventions of the art of theater itself. And maybe you disagree with me, or maybe you've caught on to something that I completely missed. Let me know in the comments. Maybe you listened to all I had to say, and you still hated the Barbie movie. And that's okay.
It's okay to be wrong sometimes.
But you can never again say that you didn't understand it. Thank you so incredibly much for watching this video. I started writing it when I first saw the movie opening night, and it has snowballed into this enormous, almost page essay that you see today, almost months later. And if you think it's pretty ridiculous that an almost 30-something spent this much time and effort dissecting a movie about pretty pink dollies, well, you're right.
It's okay. I'm owning it.
But that doesn't mean I didn't love every second of it. And now all of my Barbie knowledge belongs to you. Bye, Barbie!
Over and over and over again, people said to me, "Thank you for making my life better." Well, I don't want to put Barbie down. I am learning that she is far more important than I could have ever myself understood.